Good morning, members. Good morning, members of the public. You're all very welcome here this morning. We've got quite a full agenda, so we'll make a start. I'll ask Rob, our officer, to read out the health and safety warning, please.
Thank you, Chair. May I first remind you all of some domestic arrangements. Toilets are situated outside the meeting room opposite the stairs. Cold water is also available in the breakout area opposite the meeting room. If the fire alarm should sound, please leave the meeting room following the fire exit signs and meet on Ipswich Town Football Club training pitch, and please do not re-enter the building until you are told it is safe to return. And could I please ask you all to switch off all mobile phones or turn them to silent? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll just read out the official wording. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewings. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential and accept papers. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the council to have consented to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for the webcasting and/or training purposes. The council, members of the public and press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and press are not lawfully excluded. I don't believe we've had anybody indicate that. I don't think anybody's asked to do the filming, so we'll take it as okay. Finally, can members and officers please ensure that you press the microphone for speaking and turn off when you have finished? And to the members of the public who do public speaking later on this morning, can they get quite close to their mic so that everybody can hear? If you sit a long way back or you hold your papers over it, you can't hear so well. Thank you. Item 1, substitutes and apologies.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Barrett, Councillor Hinton and Councillor Norman.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies? Substitution, Councillor Davison.
Yeah, I'm standing in for Councillor John Hinton.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCammon.
Standing in for Councillor Norman.
Thank you. We don't have a sub for Councillor Barrett. Thank you. Declarations of interest. No? Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 3 to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of February. Councillor...
Yeah, I just need to say that I have, I'm chair of the Gypsy travelling community when that comes up. Non-pecuniary.
Declaration of interest, yeah. Right, sorry.
Well, it's, would you like to explain? And that's for you as well.
Can you tell us what, again, repeat it, please.
Sorry, Chairman, if Councillor Ayres would just say again, I think the Chairman would like to hear precisely what the role is, and the
Okay, I'm chair of the Gypsy and Traveller committee and steering committee with Lee Parker.
Chairman, the Councillor Ayres and Councillor Parker spoke to me before the meeting. It's properly declared as a non-pecuniary interest. There's no reason why the members shouldn't carry on in this with item A.
Your advice is they can carry on, but I think I'll allow Councillor Parker to register his interest because that'd be right and proper.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will then declare a local non-pecuniary interest insofar as I am a member of the Gypsy Travelling Steering Committee. Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. That's noted. You can continue with the meeting. All right.
Councillor Owen.
Councillor Owen.
Sorry, yeah, can I do a non-peculiar because I'm on the committee as well, please? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. All those 3 are noted. We'll move to item 3 to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of February. You've all had copies of them. I'll go through them and read out the page numbers. Stop me if there's anything you wish to comment on. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, no, what's that? Yes, page 13. And I now sign them as a true record, proposed by Councillor Osborne, seconded by Councillor Jemison. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Item 4, do we have any petitions?
Yes, Chair, we have 2 petitions to report for this meeting. If you just bear with me a moment, I'll just get out the details. So the first petition to report is regarding the application DC 19-00291 in Bentley. And that, I'll just read out the statement of the petition, which is, I object to the planning application DC 19-00291 of housing development as brought by code development planners and the land west of Church Road, Bentley, Suffolk. The following reasons are of concern to me: infrastructure, village character, wildlife and safety, and that is signed by 215 valid signatories. The second petition to report to committee today is regarding the first application on the agenda, which is DC 19-04923. With the following statement. We, the undersigned residents of Monks Eleigh and surrounding villages, are strongly opposed to the establishment of a gypsy and traveller site on land north of Second Pits, Highlands Road, Monks Eleigh. We call on Babergh and Mid-Suffolk District Councils to refuse planning permission. This land is situated in a very peaceful rural area, not near any amenities and close to a listed building. It should be maintained for agricultural equine use and is completely unsuited to use as a gypsy and traveller site. And that is signed by 111 valid signatories. And that's all, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Well, both those will are noted and will come up through the due process. Thank you. Item 5, site inspections. Officers, do you have any to recommend? No? Members? No? Thank you very much. Then you have next Wednesday, the 4th of March off. You haven't got to report for site inspections. Thank you. It's spring coming along, so bear that in mind. Item 6, plan and applications to be determined by the committee. We have 4 in front of us today. A is land north of Second Pits, Highlands, Monks Eleigh. That's on page 3. And
That's the table of papers, sorry, Chair.
yes, no.
Yeah, the actual report starts on page.
Oh, does it? Oh, sorry. Right, on page 9. Yeah, well, that one's no use to me, turn that over. Page 9, and the officer is Daniel Cameron. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. There's nothing to add to the report in front of members today by way of table papers or late papers. So everything is as set out in the report. Within the report itself, I just want to draw members' attention to a typing error at point 6.3 on page 29. I, of course, meant to give members an overview of policies CN01 and the MPPF with regards to design criteria. Hopefully members are well versed with those policies and the MPPF in any respect. But I just wanted to make you aware that that's my error that's made it through to the papers today before you. If we look at the presentation, so yes, the application is for a single gypsy and traveller pitch on land to the north of Second Pits, Highlands Road, Monks Eleigh. The application is made in full. It would allow the siting of one gypsy and traveller pitch, and that pitch would comprise of one mobile home, 2 touring caravans, and it would also include the erection of 1 day room. In terms of planning history on the site, there's already planning permission been granted on the site for the erection of stables and for the stabling of horses and grazing of horses on the land as well. The site's located 2.5 miles from Brent Ely, 1 mile from Monks Eleigh and 1.1 mile from Kettle. The site is isolated from services and facilities and likely to be highly reliant upon private motor vehicles to access services, and the development is also held to be harmful to the settling of Wagga Farm, which is a Grade 2 listed building approximately 100 metres to the north of the site. The recommendation before you today is to refuse the application on heritage grounds and on the basis that it doesn't represent sustainable development. Here we have an aerial map with the site highlighted in purple. We can see within the map both Wagga Farm here and then Second Pits here. We then move on to the constraints map. The site falls within a special landscape area that's identified as flowing along the banks of the River Brett and the River Box. It's described within your landscape guidance as having a tranquil rural feeling. It's mainly made up of agricultural farmland with isolated farmsteads within it, although we do note a number of historic villages. We also note that the orange mark on Wagga Farm just denotes it's a Grade 2 listed building. And then we have the site location plan marked in red, and I'll come into the planning background of the site in a little bit more detail. The stables located here for members, as well as the paddock land and access, is already approved under previous planning applications. This application would simply deal with the siting of touring caravans here and here, a mobile home and a day room. There'd be increased planting along this boundary here. Everything else shown within the application drawings are already on site. With regards to the day room, it's a fairly utilitarian building, square plan, brick and clay plain tiles. It's designed to allow additional internal space for use, ancillary to the touring caravan or mobile home for those sort of utilities or domestic purposes that you might not want to undertake in there. If we just go now to the map, the red point indicates the application site. And this is just to visually illustrate the connections to the various villages. Kettle up here to the north, Monks Eleigh and Charlesworth are down here to the south, and then we have Brent Ely over here, south-west. Just going to quickly run through the site photographs for you members. This is the view down Highlands Road from the access to the site. We can see the fencing denoting the change on the horse box as well. Here's a view across the site towards the river. We can see some of the outbuildings associated with Wagga Farm just here for you members, and I've also got an image later that shows the relationship to Wagga Farm itself in terms of the listed building. Here's the existing access already in place and a view over the remaining site. This is a view back up along Highlands Road towards Monks Eleigh. You see the road inclines up a hill and then turns. And then this is the view of Wagga's Farm from Highlands Road. This is the farmhouse itself here, largely screened from the site by the tree. And that's it for you members. Everything else is as set out in the report. I'll pass back to you if you have any questions arising from the detail.
Thank you very much for that. We have public speakers present today, members. The parish council. As you know, two parish councils are involved in this, so they have 3 minutes each, and that will go all the way through to all the public speakers, the supporters, the objectors, applicant agent, county councillor and ward member. Right, the parish council, Kettle Bastard, we have Mr Robert Butler and Angela Forrest, Monks Eleigh. If you'd both like to come forward together and take the place at the front there, and when one of you start, we'll start the timer, and there'll be 3 minutes. I'll stop you at the end of that, and then the next one can take over, and at the end of the 6 minutes, I'll see if members got any questions to you. So please, members, bear in mind that I'll ask you questions at the end of the full 6 minutes. So if you're going to forget them, write them down. Thank you. When you're ready.
Monks Eleigh Parish Council wishes to object to the planning application for the following reasons. 1. The land is not within Monks Eleigh settlement areas as defined in the core strategy plan in 2011. 2. The site falls within a special landscape area designated by Babergh as identified in section 15 of the local planning policy framework. The proposed day room, mobile home and 2 touring caravans are entirely out of character with the area and the SLA designation. 3. The application does not meet the criteria for policy CS11, Strategy for Development of Hinterland Villages, which Monks Eleigh is one. These specifically refer to site location, the village is a mile away, and local identified need, there has been none. Number 4, the application does not meet the criteria for policy CS15, which states the proposal should respect the local context and character, landscape and heritage assets. A development on this site would have a large impact on Wagga Farm, a Grade 2 listed building. 5. The application does not meet the criteria for policy CS20, the location of the site in relation to facilities. It is a mile from a shop, but 3 miles from school and medical centre. Accessibility to the village, primarily by non-car transport modes. The roads to access Monks Eleigh are very narrow and have no footpaths. There is also no public transport available whatsoever. And 6, the council considered this application as a single pitch gypsy and traveller site. The document, Gypsy Travellers, Travelling Show People and Boat Dwellers Accommodation Needs Assessment for Babergh, May 2017. This states, in accordance with the revised DCLG definition, August 2015, for planning purposes, the accommodation needed for needs of family who have permanently ceased travelling cannot be considered as part of an assessment for need for gypsy and traveller pitches. But in addition to this, looking at the requirement for residential pitches 2016 to 2036, Table 6.4, which is a summary, doesn't identify any need until the period 2031 to 36, and then for 1 pitch. Monks Eleigh Parish Council therefore wonder if the guidelines for gypsy and travellers sites apply for this application, and also, as Babergh has identified no need for additional sites, we recommend that the application is rejected. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Right, when you're ready, sir.
First, I would like to say that the Parish Council agrees with the recommendation of the Planning Officer to refuse the above planning application. In the Council's view, the proposal does not meet the criteria set by many of the planning policies. Any potential benefits are minimal in comparison to the significant environmental harm that would be caused by such an unsustainable scheme, as commented by the Planning Officer. In summary, our key reasons are as follows. 1, we fully endorse the Planning Officer's conclusion that the significant harm, landscape and environmental harms associated with the proposal significantly outweigh any benefits. 2, we would draw your attention to the consultee comments from the Fire Service and the Highways team. These suggest the installation of additional fire hydrant a long distance from current provision, and the Highways Department would mandate the provision of an extra passing place. Both measures would involve significant works and costs and serve to highlight the unsustainability and unsuitability of the site. 3. National and local planning policies, including the planning policy for traveller sites, are designed to prevent unsustainable development in the countryside and are supposed to preserve and enhance the character of the countryside. In this case, the site is not merely in open countryside, but sits in a part of the Brett River Valley that is designated special landscape area. As such, this river valley rightly enjoys additional protections from new development. The landscape assessment for the area specifically refers to the open valley appearance of this area and the unspoiled river meadows, which contribute to the visual quality of the landscape. As the planning officer has correctly pointed out in his report, the remoteness of the site from even the most basic facilities means that there would be an absolute reliance on private motor vehicles to access any and all services, with the nearest healthcare facilities and schools being some miles away and secondary schools being many miles away. We would also like to point out in this regard that with the Babergh and Suffolk councils having quite rightly declared a climate emergency in recent months, approval of an unsustainable development such as this would fundamentally undermine both councils' pledges on sustainable development and achieving carbon neutrality locally by 2030 and nationally within 25 years. We also agree with Mr Cameron's and the Heritage Team's comments that this application would cause serious harm to the Grade 2 listed building known as Wagga Farm. With the use of alien materials, we further note from the report the applicant's agent has suggested that adverse impact could be mitigated through conditions around materials. This would seem impossible for static and touring caravans. In conclusion, the Council considers the development to be contrary to many planning policies cited by the officer, as it is damaging to the protected landscape and to the setting of protected heritage assets. It is environmentally unsustainable, and any suggested benefits are both minor in comparison and questionable. We strongly recommend the application is rejected. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Members, have you any questions for the two speakers? No? Thank you very much. We now have objectors. We have two, John Doe and Brian Rowley. If you'd both like to come forward and take your seats, we'll do it in the same order. One of you go first, we'll then stop you after the 3 minutes, and the second one can then take over. And at the end, I'll ask members if they've got any questions for you. Thank you. I'll get clarification points.
Thank you, Chairman. I act for the two local resident families at Second Pitts and Wagga Farm. Your case officer has presented a very full and balanced report. In our view, he has covered all of the material points in a very balanced way. We are very much in support of what has already been said by the parish councils, and I don't propose to repeat any of the detail of what they have already said. As far as we see the matter, there are 4 points to emphasise in this case. The first is that this is plainly an unsustainable location. This is simply the wrong place for this type of gypsy and traveller accommodation. Second, there'd be clear harm to a valued landscape in this case. I'm echoing, of course, what's in the report and what has already been said by the parish councils. Thirdly, there would clearly be harm to the setting of a Grade 2 listed building, Wagga Farm. That's not just a matter of policy. As members will know, that's also a matter of law. Section 66 of the Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act. Special attention has to be given to the setting of listed buildings. And fourth, in this case, and of course something that your case officer gives careful attention to, there isn't in fact a real need made out because this particular applicant family are already resident on a lawful gypsy and traveller site. This is not one of those cases where one can say that there is a pressing need to accommodate a family that presently doesn't have anywhere lawful to reside. Just one point, if I may, with regard to the recommendation which is made on page 31 of your agenda. As I've already said, we agree very much with the analysis and the recommendation of your case officer, subject to this one point. Perhaps it would be helpful to include just one additional line in the recommendation, which of course will give rise to the reason for refusal if you decide to accept the recommendation. Perhaps there ought to be a line that says expressly there would be harm here to a valued landscape. This is special landscape. It's in the report, it's in what has been said by the Parish Council, but there isn't actually a line in the recommendation that makes that point specifically. I appreciate that by implication it's covered by CS 15, but perhaps it would be wise just to include that specifically. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. Before you commence, Mr. Rowley, I will get the officer to comment on that point at the end of your 6 minutes before I get members to ask you questions, okay? Thank you. Mr. Rowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, what I like about this application is flawed inconsistencies, which are enough in any event, I think, for the application to be rejected out of hand. From my point of view, the committee's functions do not include considering flawed applications. Forgive me, but your place is to protect and promote the well-being of the residents. And whilst that does include minorities, it does not allow minorities to tyrannise the majority. And here I think we apply the Benton's principles of what leads to the greater good. The application suffers from very serious inconsistencies. For example, it is for a total of 3 homes on site, but only parking for 1 car and 1 light goods vehicle. The application states there are no trees or hedges on the land, but the plans and the supplementary letter indicate otherwise. More importantly, the application indicates that foul sewage will be disposed of by a septic tank, but the adopted plan indicates that septic tanks in these circumstances are not appropriate. The application states there will be no gain in residential units, which begs the question, why is the applicant bothering? The supplementary letter identifies an immediate need for 1 pitch in Babergh, and from memory, this need has already been met in Newton near Sudbury. The 32 to 49 residential pitches needed in the wider area, which is mentioned in the application, covers Ipswich, Babergh, Mid-Suffolk, Suffolk Coastal and Waveney. Apart from Babergh, none of these districts need concern us today. So, ladies and gentlemen, the application is flawed to the point of being misleading. It actually provides a solution to a problem which does not exist, and it should therefore be rejected, and I call on you all to use your common sense and deny this application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I will see if members have got any questions to you. I will just answer one point, that an applicant has a right to apply for planning permission as they see fit. And we're duty bound if it ticks all the boxes for the officers to deal with it when it gets to that stage. So I hear what you say, but those are the facts we have to work by. Members, any questions? No? No? Thank you very much, gentlemen. I'll now get the officer to reply to that request of an additional point, or the reasons for it or not. Thank you. Oh, that's right.
I'll use this one. Yeah. Yes, Chair. We can, in terms of the harm to landscape, Mr. Cameron's already identified that as a sub-clause of the other policies, but there's an explicit policy CR 04 which we could reference in the reasons for refusal.
So, in other words, you'd like to add if we're minded to refuse it.
It's been put out there as an idea. If members are minded to refuse and to go with the suggestion by the gentleman, then CR04 would be the relevant policy.
Right. And you're not proposing to put it in, but if members ask for it...
It's for members to decide, yeah.
Thank you. Members, you're clear on that? Yeah. We have no supporter. We don't have an applicant or agent unless they've turned up late. No. Or county councillor. So we'll move on to the ward member, Councillor Harron. You, sir, have up to 10 minutes because we have the double time, but you don't have to use all 10 minutes, but you do have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I couldn't possibly fill 10 minutes. Probably 3 will suffice today. I think I should give compliments to Mr. Cameron, the case officer who has handled this, which is a delicate case. He's handled it brilliantly, I feel, and has brought out all the salient points. As the local ward member, I think my main concern is the ecology of the site. There may not be many people in this far-flung place, but there's a lot of wildlife and things in the grass by the river. It's a bit of a floodplain, and that would concern me. I'm not adverse to having the odd house in the countryside to help the sustainability of the village, but I think even I would probably fall short on this one. I wouldn't allow a house to be built there. I wouldn't support it. And I think what's proposed, strung out rather sort of hodgepodge, does worry me. Also, Chairman, the fact that 2 of these things are touring caravans and could come and go or be added to, I think we could be setting ourselves a difficult problem for the future and possibly an enforcement nightmare. I also have to think, is this the correct place for this family to live? I hear there are 7 children in this family, which is lovely, under all primary school age, and having had 2 children in the middle of the village and become a permanent taxi service, I do struggle to see how this is going to work. There is no village school anymore, which would have put, they would have been glad of the numbers, but since that's been closed 3 years ago, it will be difficult for education purposes, for normal general things that families do. It will just be a massive, massive sea of car journeys up and down a very narrow lane. And we do have to bear in mind we are moving into different areas environmentally. And quite honestly, I think this is a wrong place for a very large family to live. It is beyond the back of beyond, really, as you've probably seen from the photographs. And while I always value different lifestyles and tend to support them, I think for ecology reasons, I think this won't be good. And for the environment, for green travel, which cannot be achieved, I think it's wrong. It's a wrong place for the family to live anyway. And I think it's not a local family. If they were already in the village, I might be a bit supportive. But they're coming from outside the county, I understand. But nothing wrong with that. But I do feel I do support the planning officer's recommendation for refusal quite strongly, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howard. Members, is there any questions or clarification points you wish to put to him? No? Thank you very much. Right, members, it's now open for a general debate. Who would like to start? Councillor McLaren.
Can I ask a question to the officer, please?
Yep. Can you get nearer your mic, please?
Sorry.
Pull it forward.
Pull it forward. Daniel, I was interested in the presentation that you gave, and I was very interested in the representations that came from the public.
I'm sorry, members can't hear you. Can you get closer?
Sorry.
You haven't got a loud voice, but perhaps you can try and shout a bit.
Well, I've got a loud voice. It's just that I'm being polite. In terms of the representation, I was a bit taken aback. It's on page 21. And the final view that was expressed, that the personal the circumstances of the applicant are key to the proper consideration of this application and should be open to public scrutiny. I found that a bit difficult to accept. And I wondered whether when you're screening objections and letters from the public, if there is some process in which I find that remark quite inappropriate. And considering it was on the District Council's website, so therefore available to the public, is there no process or procedure that unacceptable comments can be removed before being put to the general public? Thank you.
Members, the councillor's referring to page 21, the bottom point. Okay?
So in support of their application, the applicants and the agents provided some detail as to the personal circumstances of the applicants and their children. Because that went into personal detail, it was held that we needed to make that sensitive. We're still under certain duties with regards to GDPR, and you know, we are still charged with controlling that information, despite the fact that it has been submitted to us. That has been available for officers to look at and to scrutinise, but it's not necessarily always appropriate that we put in the public domain. And I think that comment just noted that because the agent's planning statement, which was a public document, noted this private statement, that there was just a feeling among local residents that they wanted to have sight of this document as well. But I think it was felt that in our duty as data controller, it wasn't appropriate in this instance to make that personal information available to the public.
I hope that helps. Councillor Parker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This has particular interest to me, this application, because I happen to live in the only other village in the Babergh district that actually contains a formalised traveller site at Newton. And I can say with absolute certainty, Chair, that a lot of the fears that have been expressed throughout the report in terms of sustainability, in terms of damage to the heritage asset, etc., the site at Newton is actually extremely similar to the situation that we're looking at here. And I can say that that site has coexisted with villages without realising any of the fears that have been expressed throughout the report. So I'll just make that point. However, at paragraph 3.16, it does say that the needs assessment, which was completed in 2017, does indeed, and it was mentioned, one of the speakers mentioned it, does indeed show a need of one pitch within the district within the planned period. So could you just clarify for me, is that one additional pitch, or is the existing pitch what is required?
So I'm not aware of the application at Old Newton, so you are probably better versed than I am to know when that was brought forward and when the use on that site was begun. My understanding from the Gypsy Travelling Show People and Boat Dwellers Accommodation Needs Assessment is that within the period 2017 to 2036, there is a need for one additional pitch within Babergh District. In terms of the delivery of that, I think the speaker from the Parish Council is correct. I think that is probably bookended towards the back of the plan period, but there's nothing to say that if a suitable site comes forward before that time, members aren't allowed to consider whether or not they would like to see that approved and brought forward. And additionally, although the need is for one site, again, members, if they're so minded, can support more than one site. We could provide more than the minimum required need from the needs assessment.
I think it's within your gift. Any other comments, members? Councillor Busby.
Yeah, needs interesting question, isn't it? We've identified that we want one extra pitch, and therefore that assumes that there's only one set of travellers that are going around looking for a pitch. If you live in Copdock, Capel or Pinewood, you'll know that it's not the case, because frequently we get 5 to 10 travelling vans turn up in these areas, because presumably there aren't any pitches available for them to go to. So you'd question the need whether one pitch will satisfy it. From my point of view, I think it's fairly straightforward. I think if it was a house that we were looking at in this position, we wouldn't accept that either. It's not sustainable. It's in the middle of countryside. Again, like Bryn, I haven't got a problem with some houses, individual houses in villages, if it helps maintain or keep the village alive. In this case, I think it's just in the middle of, almost in the middle of nowhere. Doesn't have anything going for it. So whether it was a house or a caravan or whatever it is, I think it would be no.
Thank you. Any other comments, members? Councillor Parker?
Yeah, I concur actually with Councillor Busby, notwithstanding my previous comments. You know, the fact of the matter is we do now have a local plan, and the plan policies are quite clear. You know, personally, it's regretful that we can't take a more open view of the situation, but nonetheless, the policies are what the policies are, Chair. So I think that the officer's recommendation is absolutely spot on, and I think I'd like to propose that we go with the officer's recommendation on this occasion, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parker. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Ayres?
Yes, I totally support Councillor Parker's comments, and yes, I do have every sympathy for them, but this is not the right place, so I support it.
You heard the comment about the extra valued landscape, and the policy number is CR04. Do you wish to add that to the recommendations, Councillor Parker, or not?
Well, Chair, I mean, it's not in the recommendation at the moment. Can I ask the officer in their professional opinion, do they feel that it would add to the validity of the recommendation as it stands?
Is it necessary? Because we shouldn't put on conditions which are not necessarily required. I do agree there with you. Can you answer? The officer, that's over to you.
You can do. There are arguments both ways. The CS15 talks about mitigating harm to landscape in any case. So we sort of have covered it. I think the comments from Mr Dagg are right, that if we want to expressly draw out the harm to the special landscape area as well, we are able to add a sentence that then brings that out. And if we wish to reference CR04 for completeness, then I think there's not a problem
I think
there.
the point more is that you chose not to put it in, and you've covered the reason why you didn't put it in, and you don't feel it's necessary. I think that's what you've got to know way up, Councillor Parker, as to whether you think it's necessary or not. Oh, you want to comment? Go on then.
Yeah, sorry, just to add in. It is designated as special landscape area, so it's all valued landscape. That gives it a higher bracket of consideration. So, if you're thinking that way, you could add it in special landscape area.
Looks like it's back to you, Councillor Parker.
I think it's a great idea. I think we should add it, Chair.
Thank you very much. And as a seconder, do you wish to support that still? You do. Thank you. So it's been proposed, members, by Councillor Parker and seconded by Councillor Ayres, that we accept the officer's recommendation with the additional policy CR04. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That is carried. Thank you. There's no one against. Members, the next item is on page 35. The case officer is Jack Wilkinson. He's supported here by Louise Barker, who, just wave please. Strategic Housing, who's going to support the officer in this. So if you have any questions regarding that, in due course. Okay, thank you very much. Over to you, Jack. Thank you for that. You can hear me?
Well,
not very well.
I can when you say something like that, but I can't hear anyone saying the policy CR 52. It's impossible. I'm sorry.
You come in front of the glass.
Yeah. The members of the public there, perhaps if you'd like to come and sit on those 2 rows in front of the glass, and we'll see whether you can hear better from there.
Speakers, haven't they? That's the issue. These
Yeah. What about the people at the back? Yes, you. Can you hear well?
It's a little bit more muffled than usual.
Right.
But it is more muffled.
Then I think...
Yeah, the glass, the seats behind the glass don't have any speakers. So where you're all sitting now, there's speakers there, so you should be able to hear. But behind the glass,
right.
No speakers.
Let's... Yeah. Right. Those members of the public that's sitting right at the back, if you want to come forward and join these people in there, where you'll be able to hear better. Because we can't do anything about the sound, but we'll note that, and I'll ask our officer Rob here to take that away and look at it. But Stuart at the back, can you hear okay? Oh, good. Right. We'll just wait, members, for the public to move. Right, members, perhaps I could remind you again to lean very close to your mics when you're speaking so that we can try and make sure that the public can hear us. I've forgotten where we were. I think we were over to Jack. You were going to take us through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members of the public. I'm Jack Wilkinson. I'm a Principal Planning Officer for Babergh Mid Suffolk. The next item is item 6B on page 35 of your papers, and it relates to land west of Church Road in Bentley. The proposal is for outline planning for the erection of up to 45 dwellings, shared foot and cycle path and access. So in terms of site location, we're in the southeastern area of the district, with Capel towards the northwest, Ipswich to the north up the A12, and Colchester south along the A12 as well. In terms of the defined red line outline, it is as shown. It adjoins the village to the north and is a 2.89 hectare site. I'm going to zoom back out as well, just to give you an idea, again, of how far the site extends out from the main body of the village. Now, this is the defined built-up area boundary for the hinterland village of Bentley. The application site is towards the north, as hatched. Zooming in again slightly further, this is the proposed joint local plan settlement boundary, outlined in pink, which you will see it goes around the entirety of the village. It does partially include part of the application site. In terms of other constraints, you've got a defined open space to the west and a central piece here. There's also, which is, forgive me, it's slightly faint, but there's a public right of way that operates along the western flank and indeed the northeastern flank as it leads into the centre of Bentley. In terms of additional constraints, the green hatching is the special landscape area that is defined. And the land is principally agricultural in nature, mainly to the northwest and beyond those areas. To the eastern edge, as shown, and the southern edge, we have the main backdrop of the village. Certainly there is an appreciation for how the landscape speaks to the village and vice versa. This is quite an open area, and I'll provide some photos in a moment just to give you a wider view of the landscape. So in terms of fixed details, again, this is an outline application for 45 units. This is a parameters plan. Now this shows the developable area here set in orange. The green area shows the open space along with associated utilities such as water attenuation and other utility services that would be associated with the build. I'm going to go through some of these details just to give you an idea. We can always flick back to it should we so need to. But another fixed element here is the proposed access. There's no issue with the access from the Highways Authority, and your officers concur with that. Once we take a look at some photos later on, you'll appreciate as well the edge of site here, which fronts residential dwellings and indeed to the south as well. There's good established hedgerows, and this land at the minute is all agricultural land. The actual boundary appears to be delineated by a furrow, so I'll go into that in a moment. Whilst this is outlined, we need to consider the extent to within which this extends from the main body of the village. And there's also the potential within the proposal, not just for 2-storey units, but also 2.5-storey. That may be at focal points, but it is a fixed element that's included, so we must consider that. Just to finish off to the south, there is a pedestrian cycle link that's proposed that would largely sit along the back of existing units running to the south and any proposed units to the north. You may wish to see para 2.2 of the report. So going into the site frontage, we have some main photos that shows the maturity of the trees and indeed that verge, which is running along the eastern side. Again, you may wish to follow the arrow marker along the bottom left here, which shows where these photos were taken from approximately. And the access would be along the left-hand side here, opposite dwellings on the right-hand side. This is the access point, so this is the most southeasterly point of the application site. As you can see here, the access would be slightly in from that. And zooming in, this is the configuration to Local Highways Authority standard. So I'm going to take you through some photos just to show you the topography, which isn't too clear, and again, apologies. Where the red marker is the roof of a vehicle, my car when I went and visited on site. The land slopes down as you come out of the village, and you can see that incline. So as you're coming out of the village, there's the primary school which carries on up this road, and if you relate at the minute, the school is approximately where the marker is. I'll show you later on. Stepping into sight, you can see the dip towards the northeastern corner. That's quite a good shot actually, because it shows the contour, and this would be where the lower lying land is. This tree line here is the backdrop of Bentley in terms of the village boundary. You can relate to the map that shows that. Mainly turned earth at the minute, of agricultural nature. Here's the western boundary of the site and a view looking across. And I suppose this shot is probably the most useful in outlining how open the site is. We would need to consider this, and certainly there are concerns from a landscape perspective of how open the site is and how well it could integrate. This is a scheme for 45 units that could potentially be up to 2.5 stories high in places. So we need to balance that in the overall decision. More views across the site. This would be the approximate position of the public / cycle and footpath along the southern edge. And a similar view of that eastern boundary. So back to the map, it's prudent to go through an assessment of whether Bentley, in your view, would provide sufficient services, facilities and amenities. And as a means of highlighting that, I'm going to drop some figures on that shows what is where. So effectively we have the primary school towards the northeast. We have Baptist church, hairdressers, stores, public house, the case is altered, and the community shop. And the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that there's a red dot as well. Now this shows the nearest bus stop. There's also one on this corner here as well, but that's not the nearest. This is the nearest, which is where the red dot is shown. So I'll take the marker away. Now, in the assessment of whether this site is capable of being supported, your officers don't believe that it can be, based on the fact that there isn't sufficient services and facilities to enable a scheme to be supported for up to 45 units. There needs to be places for people to live and work and to sustain a reasonable level of domestic option in order to live. That being said, there is the bus stop option. However, this service is extremely limited at best. So that's been factored into the overall consideration. So final summary, here are some facts and figures for you to consider. There is an element of discussion within the report that I've gone into at length around the affordable housing. Now, typically, the benchmark minimum requirement from policy states that 35% should be provided. Now, the proposal includes 35%, however, there's a slight caveat with that, insofar as that it could be delivered across this site as option 1, or option 2, which is the preference from the applicants, is to provide 35% on this site and another, i.e. split across 2 sites. I've referred to this as the Station Road site. The Station Road site does not benefit from planning permission. It's not established, and I can't rely on that at this stage. In order to deliver that, it would be set within a Section 106 agreement that would fall away if members were inclined to approve this application. Now, that's within your papers, and I'll be happy to discuss. I suppose it's prudent to move on, that the recommendation from your officers is for refusal as set out on page 61 and 62 of your papers. This relates largely to the principle of development, landscape impact and sustainability. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that full report. We have members of the public here, Parish Council, which is Michael Bradford. Okay. Is that M or N? Right.
Thank you. I think this is a distinct worse system than I recall last time I was here. But anyway, good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. Thank you for hearing our representation. I'm speaking as Chair of the Parish Council on behalf of the Council and residents. The village first became aware of this development in November 2018. When it was presented to the village, it was a meeting which was well attended and generated significant feeling, and it will be evidenced also the nature of that feeling from the petition which you've received. It was considered in its original form in January last year, and after an extraordinary meeting, and a decision was made to recommend refusal, largely on the grounds of CS11. This is a large development outside the built-up area, and there is no justifiable need that was presented or can be evidenced to date. It would represent a 13% increase of the housing in the village. There's already a 10% increase accepted and or under process of being built, and therefore it would represent overall a 25% just about increase in a hinterland village, hinterland of Capel St Mary, where the current local plan suggests 5 to 10% is appropriate over the next 15, 20 years. The committee will be aware of the already proposed large developments in Capel, which is the host of this cluster. It was also recommended that it should be rejected on the grounds of CS2 in respect of its impact on social and physical infrastructure, and there was already problems with the health, educational and transport infrastructure and water and sewage services. It was also considered unacceptable on the grounds of CS15 with its impact on the special landscape area as is, and the projected local increase in the boundary of the A and B to include parts of the village. Its impact on biodiversity and highway safety particularly was emphasised. This is exiting onto a single track lane, which is the principal access to the school and the church, and generates significant traffic at specific times, which could be hindered by traffic in and out of the site. And we take exception to the highway safety report. The application was represented and had an item removed, which was the provision of a school drop-off point, and this makes it significantly worse from my point of view. The village has had a landscape assessment in the process of its construction of its neighbourhood plan, and Alison Farmer has emphasised, and to quote, the application would impinge on the subtle valley topography and have an urbanising influence on the character of Church
I'm sorry,
Road.
your time is now up.
Thank you. We'd just like to propose rejection on the grounds of...
If there's any questions for you from members.
CS11, CS2, CS15,
Members of the
CR04.
public.
Thank you.
Sorry. Members, have you any questions? No?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Mrs. Monday, an objector.
Thank you. I'm here to represent the objections of Bentley residents. As highlighted by Alison Farmer's landscape report, the site has key qualities that make a notable contribution to landscape character and have a medium to high sensitivity to the type of development proposed. The topographic variation within and adjoining the site means that development will dominate the landscape, despite the landscaping proposed on the plan. And the effect will be harmful on the rural lanes and footpaths that surround the site on 3 sides. The use of public rights-of-way is a valued recreation in Bentley. From responses to our neighbourhood plan, village questionnaire, they are considered the second most important facility to village life and significantly contribute to our well-being. Visitors to our village use these footpaths and enjoy far-reaching rural views, which in turn supports our community pub and shop. This site is within the setting of the revised boundary of Suffolk Coast and Heath A&OB and is just 430 metres away from the development site. The development, the sewage pumping station and infiltration basin will be highly visible from the elevated views of footpath 40. The harmful impacts on the scenic quality of the area cannot be overemphasised. The natural beauty and tranquility that public rights-of-way users currently experience will be lost. As regards the bus service, let me clarify. There is only one service per day now that only serves the needs of Suffolk 1 students. There is no bus service that is serviceable for getting into Ipswich for employment. We don't even have a bus service that connects to our core village of Capel St Mary. So we have no sustainable options for living and working needs in our village. Church Road itself has been highlighted as a single-track rural lane with few passing places and no footpaths for most of its length. This road is also being considered for designation as a quiet lane. This development could generate at least 90 additional vehicles trying to access this rural lane, as well as extra delivery vehicles that are increasingly used to deliver goods direct to people's homes. This will increase safety risks for walkers, cyclists and horse riders who use this narrow lane, as well as pupils who walk from the primary school to St Mary's Church, not shown on your map, several times a year. Bentley is not averse to development, and we are building houses. In the housing needs assessment prepared for our neighbourhood plan, it recommends 38
Monday,
houses
I'm sorry, your time
over the
is up.
plan
I'll
period.
see if there's any questions for you. Members? Councillor Davis.
Sorry, but I was interested in that point about your neighbourhood development plan. So could you expand on that?
Yes, because we're considered a complex site, we've been given extra resources to have special consultations done for us, both for landscape and for our housing needs assessment. And AECOM, who have done our housing needs assessment, have recently just supplied us with our final version that has been reviewed by locality of 38 houses over the plan period.
Thank you, that was very useful. Any other questions, members? Councillor Busby.
Sorry, you say 38 houses over the period, but you did, I think Michael said that they'd already done some.
Yes, yes. We've actually, since the 1st of April 2018, we've built 10 houses and we're planning 31 more. So those are actually planned houses in the village. And we hope that we will have more affordable homes in association with Hastow Homes as well.
Very good. Councillor Busby.
Yeah, having been one of those people that walked round your village yesterday and fell over in the mud, but we won't go into that, walked around that site, the road is flattened out by the photographs. It's very difficult to get the slope.
Can I push you for a question?
Yep. It looks like that road might flood. Does that happen?
It does happen frequently. In actual fact, the bottom of the site, below the site in Church Road, has been shown on national flood maps to be subject to surface water flooding, at high risk of surface water flooding. And we have got pictures of children in canoes paddling across at the bottom of Church Road to get to the primary school. That has been improved recently because the farmer has done a lot of work to dig out the local ditches, but we are still concerned about the effect of surface water flooding with this development.
Thank you. Must disappoint the children. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much. We don't have a supporter. We have an applicant, Helen Adcock. If you'd like to come forward. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee. At the end of it, if you remain seated or standing, I'll see if there's any questions for you. Thank you.
There we go. Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. My name is Helen Adcock. I am a Director of Code Development Planners. The applicant, Don Baker, is a local farmer who owns the land adjacent to the north, east and southern edges of Bentley, built-up area boundary. He lives in Bentley and he has brought his family up and his children have gone to Bentley School. He therefore wishes to ensure that the new homes for Bentley are of a scale and form that meet the needs of the village and which can be delivered in a way that doesn't, with unmitigated restraint, put pressure on the services of the village, services and infrastructure of the village. This is one reason he has progressed the application himself, so that rather than a developer promoting an area of land and seeking to maximise the developable area, the full extent of the site's constraints, opportunities and the needs of the community have been explored to ensure that the developable area respects the landscape setting the trees, the opportunities to increase biodiversity, surface water drainage and highways, and the opportunities for community benefits. The applicant wants to ensure that the development can deliver what is needed proportionate to the village and within the bounds of planning regulations. Landscape has been a subject of the landscape visual appraisal undertaken by a qualified landscape architect, and the findings have been endorsed by the Planning Services Landscape Officer, who has been the consultee of Babergh District Council, and they have raised no objection to the proposals. I draw your attention to the Whirlage and Knot letter that was put into the late papers yesterday in relation to a phasing condition and the marketability and viability of that. If you consider here today in your discussions that due to the landscape concerns a phasing condition would be appropriate, that letter demonstrates to you that it would be viable and marketable to developers. Need is discussed within the officer's report, and it would appear that with the amendment to the Section 106 heads of terms in relation to affordable housing, this could overcome the objection in relation to the development's ability to address need. The appeals referred to in the officer's report have been shown on the map in the attached late papers as being some way distant and isolated from the village itself, so we believe that those should be discounted from your consideration. Whilst it might be a scale of development that some within the village are seeking to resist, it is a scale of development that fulfills a demonstrable need in accordance with the relevant policies of your local plan and policies of government. Infrastructure has been demonstrated and set out in the officer's report to be suitable for the delivery of the proposals, and no objections from the main statutory consultees. There is no evidential reasons for the refusal of this planning application that's before you today. Happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll see if there's any questions. Members, Councillor Davis.
I'll do two at once if I may, and that'll make it easier for you. First of all, the affordable housing contribution, why not just say it'll be 15 in that area rather than try and offset it somewhere else? And B, were you and your applicant aware of the neighbourhood development plan, which obviously contradicts quite a bit of what you've just said?
I'll take the first question first. In terms of affordable housing, it was actually a recommendation or suggestion from officers of Babergh District Council back in 2018 to split it across the two sites. The applicant can, and it is within your gift as members here today to discuss this, to say, yes, actually, we're minded to approve this subject to the Section 106 heads of terms being amended to only have the one option, that it's 35% fully on site. That's within your gift, and it would be something that the applicant would be happy to go along with. Like I say, it was a suggestion from officers back in 2018, seemed a reasonable one at the time, but like I say, things move on. In relation to the local plan,
Fine.
Yep.
Not our local plan, but the Bentley neighbourhood development plan.
Yes, sorry. In relation to the neighbourhood plan, just checking some dates in relation to what the chair of the Bentley Parish Council said. Actually, we had meetings back in 2017, September 2017, with representatives of Bentley Parish Council. We then followed that up with another meeting in July 2018 before the application went to their parish council meeting later on in 2018 before we put the application or after we put the application in. So we have had dialogue for a long time with the parish council, as we have done with officers of Babergh. In relation to the neighbourhood plan, at the time that we started to prepare the application and do all of the reports and stuff to assess, like I say, the constraints and opportunities of the site, the neighbourhood plan area had only just been defined, and in terms of the neighbourhood plan process itself, it hadn't progressed to a stage that would and could have influenced the application. And whilst members of Bentley Parish Council are party to the neighbourhood plan and what's going on in the background, actually publicly we haven't seen anything or been party to anything or had any discussions, had the ability to have discussions.
I think I'm going to stop you there. I think you've answered the question regarding the neighbourhood plan. Thank you very much. There's somebody else who had it. Councillor Jemison.
My question was the same as Councillor Davis on the affordability, so it's been covered.
Any other questions? Councillor Busby?
Hi, yeah. The second site for the affordable housing, is that site, proposed site owned by the same farmer? And if so, why didn't you put in a planning application for that at the same time if the two were linked?
So both sites are owned by the applicant. The Station Road site is being progressed by Hasto, so Hasto approached the landowner and it is for them to run their own application. The application for west of Church Road is being run by the landowner himself, whereas I understand that the Station Road site would be run by Hasto.
Thank you. Any other questions? I just have one. If we were minded to approve this, how quickly would you start on site?
We would obviously, because it's an outline application, we'd have to put forward reserve matters and they would be done in connection with a developer. As you would have seen from yesterday, Whirlage are not as agents for the landowner, is on board and is confident that there is latent demand for such a site and that a developer could be found quickly and an application for the reserve matters could be put in quickly. So in terms of delivery, subject to whether you go for a phasing condition or not, we could start on site within the next 18 months.
So we're still at the early stages then. Thank you. Councillor Busby.
Sorry, yes, one other thing. Housing needs survey. Did you do any kind of survey?
Yes, so as part of the application material that's in front of you and for your ability to look at, we've done a housing needs survey done by Pioneer, which is part of the papers. So, and that demonstrates, that you'll see that document in your papers. That demonstrates that there is a need for up to 45 dwellings within the village. What I wasn't clear about is whether that came across in the officer's report, because it seems that with the housing need in the officer's report, he refers to affordable housing. This document demonstrates and evidence that there is both market need and affordable need within the village.
Councillor Busby, our strategic housing officer, is present. I think at the end of this we'll put that question to her and she can comment on it for you. Okay? Any other questions? No? Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll go straight to our housing officer, strategic housing officer. You heard that comment from the last speaker, and the document she held up. Can you comment on it, please?
Yes, as far as I know, that's not a primary data, that's just an assessment of existing, so it's secondary data assessment. Is that correct?
Yes, in terms of the CS11 requirements, that housing needs report is a response to the requirements under CS11.
And also in response to the question about the two sites, my response was an objection to that proposal to split it across the two sites, and on the evidence that was presented, we could not support that in strategic housing, and I must say that looking at the reports that have been provided, it seems to propose that the affordable housing will be delivered by the applicant on the rural exception site. Well, that's not actually true. It's just the land that is being given over or provided. I have spoken to Hasto Housing on that point, and I just wanted you to understand that.
Thank you.
Do you need any other clarification?
No, we'll come back to you if there's any other questions. It was just that point I wanted to clear up. Thank you. Right, where are we? We don't have any county councillor present wanting to speak. Councillor Busby is the ward member, but he's chosen to remain a member of the planning committee, and he'll take part in the general debate, which we will now go into. Thank you very much. Yep, thank you. Members. Councillor Busby.
So, can I just pick up the point of the housing officer? You said you'd spoken to Hasto recently. Have they explained why they haven't put in an application for that? So?
Doesn't seem to be right. Okay. I can't particularly comment on that point in as much as I just know that they're, if you like, waiting to see what happens with this application. But there is no option agreed. There is no formal agreement in place. It was just some discussion that took place quite a while ago, probably in 2018 when I wasn't involved on in this site. And I think, just waiting to hear what happens on this site. But it is a standalone rural exception site that was being looked to be delivered by the parish council. They've done a lot of work on that in conjunction with Mid Suffolk and Hasto. They did a local needs housing survey that was carried out by Community Action Suffolk, and that has identified a need for a rural exception site. Whereas this site that's proposed, if they wanted to provide it across 2 sites, is not something that we would support. We believe that there's a need for a small scheme, which is a rural exception site, and that this standalone other main site should be capable of providing 35%. And the issue of having the other site involved shouldn't really be the case.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Parker.
Are we now in debate then, Chair? Yep, right, okie dokie. So can I just thrash this business out about the affordability then in that case? Because, I mean, it seems absolutely clear from what our strategic housing officer is saying, and indeed we've done something very similar in our own village in terms of development with Hasto, but it occurs to me that it's in no way relevant to this application at all at this stage. So I don't know if this is admissible or not, but Ms Adcock sent us a very late submission last night as committee members, and I just want to thrash this business about this deliverability of affordable housing being over a split site. Is that correct then, that it was our officer's recommendation, and if it was, why?
Yes, this came up in briefing, so Councillor, sorry, Jack, if you'd like to answer that for the councillor.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your question, Councillor Parker. I think the option is there. However, we have to determine what's in front of us, and if we're being plain and simple, what is before us is the scheme that I've presented, but also there's no guarantee that the Station Road site, I wish I could ping a reference to it, but we haven't got an application that's approved. So you'll have to come to your own conclusion on whether you consider that to be a reliable source of achieving 35% across 2 sites, or whether we should deliver this, if you're minded to approve, on site in its entirety through a Section 106. There is the capability of doing that, and if the Station Road site is not approved, then that element would fall away from the Section 106 and it would be provided on this site. Hopefully that's clearer.
It's a little clearer, but it is complicated, yes, but I think you've got the picture. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of sympathy for the developer in terms of when they started this whole application. I think a lot of things have changed, they've moved on. I agree with what Jack has just said about it's 2 separate applications. You picked the absolute point on. And just looking at this application, there's so much against it in terms of the affordable homes, if you like, its location. One of the other things that probably wasn't in the pipeline at the time was the change of the boundaries within the AONB. And as you know, I'm an advocate of we're signed up to the AONB. It's important that we don't just pay lip service to it, but we actually take action on that. And as has been pointed out by the residents, the proximity of this development to that. So that's another reason. The sustainability obviously has been well documented. So for all of those reasons, all the recommendations by the officer, I'd like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation to refuse.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Plum, do you wish to comment?
No, not at this stage. Thank you.
Any other comments, members? No? Right, well, there's no other comments then. Members have discussed it. There's been a recommendation for refusal following the officer's recommendation. It's been seconded. All those in favour, please show.
It's unanimous.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We're now on to page 65. Councillor Busby. I was trying not to look at him. Yes, Councillor Busby. You want a 5-minute break, don't you? Perhaps you'll be back by 11:05. Thank you. Adrian. Right, members, we're back in session. We're on C, which is on page 65. And the case officer, Bradley Heffer.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members, ladies and gentlemen. This application before you, or this proposal, is seeking agreement for reserved matters following the grant of an outline planning permission for residential development on a site at Capel St Mary. My pointer there is just floating over Capel St Mary Parish, just to give you some idea of where that is in relation to the overall administrative area. The site itself is abutting the village on this northeastern boundary, and there you can see the existing residential development adjacent, and also some residential development along the old London Road, and the line of Butcher's Lane, which isn't actually the proposed means of access to the site, that being Little Tufts, which is off the estate to the left-hand side. This is the constraints plan, which you'll see mainly consists of areas of tree preservation order which aren't affected by the site itself. There is a heritage asset. There is one listed building near the site, which is roughly where you see the red dot. Apart from that, there isn't anything that would be directly impacted. The other useful thing to point out is the line of public right-of-way which goes along Butcher's Lane and then returns across to London Road. And the other useful thing to note on this, which you couldn't see on the last slide, is a newer residential development which has taken place adjacent to the site, which is known as Boundary Oaks. This is the proposed site layout, which you can see takes form of an access off of Little Tufts, which is the existing road to the left-hand side, and there's a series of cul-de-sac, and perimeter blocks of development. And you'll also note that there's two areas, larger areas of open space to the south and north of the site, a SUDS attenuation area, and incidental areas of open space within the site itself. This one gives you an idea of storey heights, the majority of stories being 2, which is the green, 2.5, which is the orangey shade there, or the sort of reddy shade you can see there. There is one instance of 3-storey development, which you'll see in due course, which is a block of apartments here, and then in the north-western corner of the site there's single-storey development. This plan shows the affordable housing layout. We felt was important in terms of how that's distributed across the site, that it shouldn't form a particular cluster, but should be part of the overall development incorporated as such. The amount of affordable housing, as you'll have noted from the report, was established in the outline planning permission at 35%, and this meets that requirement. This plan shows the layout we've just been talking about, but also includes the area to the north, the open space, and indicates on there, you can't quite see the writing, I apologise, but in effect that's saying that's the site, proposed site for a LEAP, a local area of equipped play, which is a requirement again, or something that came out of the outline planning approval. So that's the proposed site somewhere in that area, edged blue. In terms of the proposal itself, as you can see, is traditional vernacular architecture. I've started with a slide that shows one of the affordable housing units, because again, in terms of visual impact, or you shouldn't be able to discern one from the other, private from public. Details such as arches and casement windows and such are carried across both tenures. So you'll see on the private affordable unit, sorry, the public sorry, the private unit, the detached unit here, it's the same sorts of detail that you'd get on the affordable ones. Again, there's a lot of work gone into the detailed design on these. We've had a lot of discussions with the applicant in order to try to drive the design up and make it an appropriate response to what is an important site on the edge of the village. So we're happy now with the proposals. They carry around details around the building and arches and traditional features such as chimneys on some of the units, which again, in overall terms, help lift the overall appearance. This is a unit with an integral garage, which is not the happiest way to design a building because it's not a traditional form in itself, but if you're going to have an integral garage within a unit, that's probably one of the better ways of doing it and having a simple projection on the frontage. And again, another unit which I've included because this gives you an idea of variety of roof form. They don't all pitch one way, so there is gable ends onto streets, which again is a traditional feature, a village feature. Another affordable housing unit, and another one, again, similar sorts of forms. 2.5-storey unit, which again has got dormers as roof space, usable roof space. The dormer itself is not overly sized for the amount of roof, so it doesn't appear as overly bulky. This is the 3-storey unit, which admittedly there's an unusual element within the village. I don't think there's other 3-storey development in there. There's one instance of it and it's set centrally on the site, as you'll have seen, but it does follow the traditional architectural approach and does have good verticality. And by that I mean that, you know, the use of windows does mean that it doesn't look like a long squat building. It does have some sort of perpendicular architectural features. And I'll end with 2 shots of bungalows which are part of the affordable housing offer on the site. One's a detached unit which looks almost like an almshouse type design, and this is a semi-detached unit with a hipped roof. Both quite polite and in our view appropriate for a village location. This finally are 2 shots of utility structures. One, the substation, which is be located next to a unit in Tufts Way, and a simple enclosure where the pump house equipment itself is underground. So in order to secure that, they have to have some sort of structure around it. And again, that in itself is relatively harmless. Some street views here. I think it's useful in terms of gauging how the site works in terms of density, because mindful of the fact that this bleeds out into the open countryside to the north, it was an attempt to try to make sure that the density of development in this part was lower visually in order to provide that sort of visual transition between the two. So you will see there's a reasonable amount of space between dwellings, and again, this long line you see here is this long line of development here, and again it's quite spacious, as you'd expect towards the centre and the southern half where it meets the village itself. The density or the amount of space between units is less, but again visually we felt that that was an appropriate response. This gives you an idea of the view into the new housing area as you come from Little Tufts, and it's also useful to gauge the scale of the 3-storey unit which we were talking about just now, to give you some idea. It doesn't sit there too unhappily in our view. That's the 2.5-storey scale, which again is quite reasonable in overall impact terms, but I don't think that the scale of that is too harmful in that location, bearing in mind the overall height. And this is a view looking across the open space to the north, which again, hopefully over time would become more of a landscape dominated area as the landscape matured, but in any event is quite a soft or a softer approach to development now. I'll finish with some shots of what's around the area at the moment. This is a typical view of the residential development next door to the west. This is the approach to the site from Little Tufts. It's important to emphasise again that this approach and the use of Little Tufts to serve the development has been agreed at outline stage. The actual access itself would take place to the left-hand side of that post you see there, the lamp post, and you'll have noted from the red line drawing that this unit and its attendant curtilage is also owned by the applicant. This is a view of the Boundary Oaks development, which is newer than the estate you've just seen, which is more of the approach, or more similar to the approach, architectural approach and layout approach that's taken with this current development. But it gives you an idea of proximity, and the layout plan that you saw puts an area of open space immediately adjacent to that in order to protect the residents' amenity in that location. There's some lovely trees along the boundary, none of which are going to be impacted. The larger one at the end you see is covered by a tree preservation order already, but certainly there's no intention to take out any trees or hedging because they are an ecological resource, and obviously they're a resource for the development itself. A boundary with the existing development looking across the site to show the immediacy of where the village ends and the countryside starts. So I think in terms of as I said, the phasing of development that we were looking to achieve in this part, because it will create a new boundary, it's not quite as harsh as that. And there's some units, Great Tufts and Little Tufts. This is Butcher's Lane. As I said before, it's not proposed to use that for any form of access to the site, bar pedestrians and cyclists. That was established through the outline, and pedestrian and cycle ways through the site would link through to that and through to Little Tufts. What would happen in here is that, and was established at the outline stage, was that in the event that Little Tufts access was blocked, there would be an alternative route through to the site for emergency vehicles. So whilst this wouldn't be offering a route through, an everyday route, there would be bollards placed somewhere along this point here, lockable bollards, in order that, in the unlikely event that Little Tufts was blocked and you couldn't get a fire engine in, there's an alternative route. Further views of that lane we've just seen. The last thing I'll draw your attention to is the tabled papers, where you'll hopefully had a chance to read Councillor Carbondale's comments on the application, and I'll leave my presentation at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, for clarification. Yep.
A picture of that against the rest of the. Have you a picture of it against the rest of the impacted on that application, on the design of the houses, where it's situated with those? I notice you haven't put it on there.
Yes, I think I'll follow up on that, because I made a note of slide 21-22, and I couldn't really see where that was. So if you can just clarify that point before we go any further.
I think firstly, Councillor, the only view we've got of the three-storey building, apart from the usual elevational drawing, is that CGI, which shows the building there.
So slide 16, can you just show us that one? And I think that's the same. It doesn't show the. Is that what you just showed us?
Yes, yes. Yeah.
It doesn't show it like that. No, where you said it on an angle. Right, we'll come back to that, I think, Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
because I had made a note at that point, and I'm sure you'll pick it up anyway. We have public speakers here, so we're going to move on. Chris Matthews. Yep. You can remain seated or standing, whatever suits you, and I'll see if there's any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I represent the Parish Council. The Parish Council has consistently commented that the building on this site is too dense and cramped. It's actually 38 houses per hectare. The Cllr assessed this site as 5.56 hectares, suitable for 75 houses on 3 hectares, which would be 25 houses per hectare. Boundary Oaks, the adjoining development, is built at 28 houses per hectare, and the existing houses at 21. Hopkins Homes are building 97 in the village, and they are building at 20 houses per hectare. We expect in the joint local plan there will be an allocation from Scott Properties for 550 houses, which will be at 26 per hectare, so none are over 30 per hectare. There are also 2.5 and 3-storey buildings on this plan. This is not at all in keeping with Capel St Mary. Looking at the housing mix, in Capel, 48% of the homes are 4-bedroomed and 41% are 3-bedroomed. Our housing needs survey in 2016 and the SMAR identified a need for smaller starter homes and bungalows for an ageing population. The planning statement for outline permission, which was quite a pretty picture, stated that 80% are likely to be 2- and 3-bedroomed. This is not true of this application. And that there would be 2 market 2-bedroom bungalows and 2 market 3-bedroom bungalows. There are none. The planning statement in December 17 stated that there would be provision of a range of house types and tenures to cater for the needs of the existing community, as well as for new residents, including smaller homes for young families and bungalows, both affordable and market. There are not. The houses are smaller. 33% of this development is 4-bedroomed homes. There are no bungalows for sale. There's an undersupply of 2-bedroomed houses by 25%. This is not meeting the identified need for Capel St Mary. There is more open space, which is good. The planning officer said a lap. I'm under the impression it's a leap, and that play equipment must be agreed. However, the open space is next to the suds, which may be fenced or may not. Children do climb fences. The suds will be deep and dangerous and will retain water. The parish council had never agreed with the suds development and would prefer an underground system which would allow for more open space and less dense building. The suds is the cheaper option. We can do better for Capel than this development. It did get outline permission.
Thank you. Your time is up. Pleased to hear that you commented about the bungalows. I had noted myself no bungalows when he was going through it, but I'll comment later. Members, any questions to the Speaker? Councillor Busby.
So you mentioned the needs of the village in terms of the housing. Is this as a result of what's come out of the neighbourhood plan survey?
No, I was going back to the housing needs survey conducted with CAS in 2016.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have no objector, no supporter, so we have the applicant agents, Stuart McAdam. You, sir, know the procedure, so carry on.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman and members of the Planning Committee. My name is Stuart McAdam. I'm the Planning Manager for Persimmon Homes in Suffolk.
Members are being asked to consider Persimmon Homes' application seeking approval of reserve matters for a development of 100 houses as permitted by the outline consent approved by your committee in July 2018. The development layout follows key principles established in the design process instigated at the outline stage and follows positive pre-application discussions with your officers. During the course of the application and following discussions with your officers and consideration of comments received by statutory consultees, including the Parish Council and third-party representations, a series of amendments to the proposals have taken place, culminating in the plans before members today. The key changes include amending the internal road layout following an objection from Highways, an increase in the size of the affordable housing units in line with comments received from the housing officer, incorporation of a managed strip of land between the plots on the western boundary and the houses in Pen Close. A 3 metre high native hedge is proposed to be planted along the western boundary of the site as well. The public open space has been increased to the north by 1 acre, which is 0.4 hectares, thus providing more meaningful open space adjacent to the Suds Pond. And I would note that the Suds Pond is designed to be dry except in a storm event and can provide additional open space. Further improvements to the detailing as outlined by your officer to the detailing of the houses have also been incorporated into the design. This development has a strong emphasis on family housing and includes 35% policy compliant affordable homes. There's a wide range and mix of bedrooms ranging from 1 to 4, and the site also includes bungalows and flats. The majority of the dwellings are 2 and 3 bedroom houses. The layout is based upon dwellings formed around outward facing perimeter blocks, with enclosed rear garden, and houses are designed around the peripheries of the site to front onto public areas to provide a pleasant outlook and surveillance of these areas. Public open space forms a central component of the layout and provides for an attractive setting for houses whilst accommodating the principles of sustainable drainage and an area of play. Public open space is provided in the north and southern parts of the site and provide key focal point overlooked by housing. The objections from the Parish Council and third parties are noted. However, we believe that the proposals provide a balanced mix of housing at an appropriate density for the location. Concerns about drainage have been addressed and are acceptable to the lead flood authority, who has removed its holding objection. In respect of play facilities, Persimmon is happy to accept a condition to secure appropriate play provision on a designated area of open space to the north. Members will note that from the papers that apart from the Parish Council, there are no other objections to the proposals from statutory consultees.
Mr McAdam, your time's up. I'll see if there's any questions for you. Members, have you got any questions? I think I'd like to ask, why no bungalows?
There are bungalows. There's 4 bungalows included within the scheme on the western boundary. 4, yeah.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah. Do you accept that the parking provision is inadequate in terms of most of the houses have only got single spaces and there's very little room? You've shown the size of the roads, very little room to park out on the main road, and obviously that's going to cause obstruction to refuse, trucks, fire services, etc.
I don't accept that. It's reported in your report that the parking is actually in excess of the parking standards, so there are 221 spaces for each of the houses and visitor parking at 26. The total is 247, which exceeds the requirement from Highways.
Thank you. Councillor McCallum.
Mr McAdam, I visited the site yesterday and the officer gave a picture of Little Tufts as if there was hardly any cars there. I couldn't find a parking space in Little Tufts. It is a concern to me when you start the development that is going to ruin the life of those people in Little Tufts. There's just not enough space even now. Are you going to widen the Little Tufts Road? Are you going to compensate the residents of Little Tufts? Because actually, once you start development, if anybody wants to sell their house in Little Tufts, they'll have great difficulty in doing that. So what compensation, if any, are you going to offer the residents of Little Tufts?
I would just remind you, Councillor
Sorry.
that the outline of the
Yeah, no,
entrance
I understand that.
is,
No, I understand
yeah,
that.
I take your points.
I understand
I think there's a part of it that isn't outside their responsibility about widening it, but I think certainly the compensation bit, if you can answer.
Well, what I would say is that, yes, you're quite right that the access has been agreed through the outline application. As part of the outline approval, we have two relevant conditions on the permission here. One, to supply details of deliveries to the site 28 days before they are delivered, and also the requirement for a construction management plan, which will deal with the to-ins and fro-goings from the site. So that will at least be submitted and will be commented on by statutory consultees and officers and agreed prior to commencement of development.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. The other thing about the bungalows, what is interesting about Capel, St Mary, I've lived there for quite a long time, that at one time it had a predominance of young families. What happened then was parents were joining their children and living in Capel, and there is a need, there is a lot of people in Capel who wish to downsize, and there's nowhere else for them to downsize to. So is there any possibility there might be an increase in the bungalows?
Councillor McCann, sorry, before you answer that, you've just stated that you live near the site. I've been advised to find out how close to the site you live as to whether you would have an interest.
No, I live the other end of the village.
Sorry, you'll need to speak closer to the mic so we can hear you.
I'm sorry, I live the other end of the village. It doesn't impact on me personally.
I'm told that's fine. Thank you. Can you answer her question? Sorry.
And in terms of the housing mix here, we have had extensive discussions with the housing officer in the council, and they have agreed the mix as submitted. There was a comment about the number of bungalows in there, and they would have liked to have seen more. There isn't a policy in the local plan requiring a specific mix, but what we have done is provide a varied range of houses from 1 to 4 bedrooms, of which 65 of the units will be 2 to 3 bedroom family houses. So, you know, for downsizing, not everyone wants to downsize to a bungalow. They might be moving from a 5-bed house to a 2 or 3 bed house and still want extra bedrooms for family to come back and stay, for example. So we have considered that, but we wouldn't propose to increase the number of bungalows as part of this proposal.
Thank you. I think I'd just like to say, because I have persimmons, as you're well aware, in my village of Great Cornard at the moment. I have to say I tend to find that they're crammed in. That certainly looks that appearance now as I drive past it. That concerns me on this particular site. Why is it you've got permission for up to 100? Why don't you perhaps consider having less than 100? I know we've got to deal with 100, but why have you got to 100? Why couldn't we have more space around them? And certainly that block does not impress me at all. 3-storey, which I'm sure Councillor Osborne will be commenting on in a moment, because I saw his hand go up. But can you tell us why is it that you've gone right to the 100 when perhaps by having a few less you could have made it look better, when you know the problems you have at other sites of yours where they look, and I have to say, overcrowded?
I'm going to say, comment, Chairman, that I'm sure Mr McAdam would want to say himself that up to a number means that you have permission for that number, and the up to gives the applicant the flexibility to go a bit less if they find it expedient, but its permission is granted at outline stage on the basis that that number is, I'm sure my colleague will agree, that's... Yeah.
I'm very pleased you've pointed out all the legal side, but if you'd like to answer it, you may. If you feel you don't wish to, then that's fine.
I know, I just concur with what your legal advice is there. It's up to 100, and we believe that we have a development here that achieves an appropriate density for the area. It's comparable with the one that has been built off London Road to the east of the site. 20 dph is what's mentioned in your report. That's the overall area. The density brings it down. Obviously, with the developable area, pushes that density up slightly, but we feel we've got an appropriate density and the houses can conform to all policy requirements.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just a couple of questions, really. I know design is a matter of individual, ways of being. I like Marmite, you either like it or you don't like it. I'm afraid I don't like the way that those properties have been designed in that dark area. But on some of the later images that you show a lighter building. Now I don't understand why you show one set of houses dark and with brickwork by the looks of it, and the other one's light. The other factor is that three-storey building is shown there. Now that's 3 stories. How can that be the same height as a 2.5-storey? That's the first question.
I don't have the actual height of that building with me, but the CGI images that were presented, albeit as a perspective view, they are accurate because they're taken from the CAD drawings and then put into a 3D image. So what you see in terms of the perspective drawing is how it sits in relation to 2-storey aspects next to it. I don't have the actual height of the apartments, but in terms of the housing need and providing the affordable requirement, these are affordable units in line with the housing officer's comments. That's how we deliver it by a 3-storey development. You can see it there.
Yeah, but
it's around the central part and gives a focal point around that central square in the road network and development. In terms of the brick colours, there's different bricks being proposed as part of the scheme to provide variety. So there's some cladding, some render and 2 different colours of bricks. So the images you've seen will reflect the type of brick that's going to go into these plots.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just the other one, please, Stuart. You obviously have got affordable housing there, which I compliment Persimmons in doing, 35%, that's what we're looking at. However, am I assured that you will be presenting them the same as the other housing that you're putting on that site? In other words, I personally would not want to see an area that looks different to what you've already got, because so many developments that I've seen, you can spot what isn't actually, which is actually affordable housing.
The properties, as your officer presented at the beginning of the presentation, indicated the affordable housing units and then some of the private housing units. They're all designed to be tenure blind, so you would not go into development and spot an affordable unit. They're all designed in the same way with attention to detailing. Whilst we have 3 character areas within the site, it won't match the highest specification with stone sills, but it will be tenure blind, so you won't be able to differentiate between that and the private market units.
Thank you. You have one more?
And a final question, and this is really a little bit the way I'd like to see things, and I would hope that you could go forward with this. The question is, will you be able to provide any swift boxes in these houses? We're losing areas of birds in ecology, and I would think that swift boxes are very cheap to put in when the construction starts.
I can't remember whether the ecology statement, which was submitted with outline, specifically mentions swift boxes, but if members are minded to approve and wanted to add a condition to that effect, I'd be quite happy to accept that.
Thank you. Councillor Owen.
Thank you. Just a quick question, really. Can you just clarify the the number of bedroom houses you've got, like the 2 to 3 bedroom houses, how many you've got, of which sort, like the 4, the 5 bedroom, and how many car parking spaces you have with each one of them, please, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
The car parking spaces may be a bit more tricky for me because I don't have that information in front of me, but as I said earlier, they are policy compliant, so they do meet the standards set by the County Council. I'll just run through the table I have before me here. So in terms of 1-bed apartments, there are 8 for affordable rent. The 2-bed apartments, there are 6 affordable rent. The 2-bed houses, there are 6 market homes, 6 affordable rent, 6 intermediate, giving a total of 18. The bungalows, there's 2-bed bungalows, 2 affordable rent and 2 intermediate. The 3-bed houses, there are 42 market homes, 4 affordable rent, 1 intermediate, giving a total of 47. 3-bed houses, 4-bed houses, there are 17 market homes. So in total, 65 market homes, 26 affordable rent, 9 intermediate houses, giving a total of 100.
Just following on from that question, how many dwellings are in the blocks? Do you know that? Flats or whatever they are.
In apartments, yes.
Apartments.
Yeah, there are 6 2-bed apartments in the 3-storey. 6. 2 in each level.
Any, Councillor?
So on that basis, what's the square meterage of the apartments?
They vary depending on the size, but they're compliant with national space standards affordable houses. I think the smallest one is 50 square metres or 51 square metres. I can't remember the other size, to be fair. But they followed discussions with the affordable housing officer, and they all meet the requirements set by the council.
Thank you. Councillor Ayres?
Thank you. It's lovely. I really love the way the outside is going to look exactly the same between the affordable and the marketable ones. And the inside will be the same fixtures and fittings and flooring. Is that all the same?
Yeah, by and large. I mean, for the market houses, customers can up spec, so they can have a better kitchen if they want. There will be a standard kitchen that is offered in all the houses. The finish is pretty much the same. Again, in the bathroom, you can upgrade to better tiles or however much you want to spend to make it better, but there will be a basic standard in all the houses which will be similar throughout all the plots.
Thank you. Any other comments, members? Councillor Jemison?
In terms of energy efficiency, what measures have you taken? I can't see any PV panels or electrical charging points.
Again, on the outline plan permission, condition 4, I think it is, requires us to submit details on renewables, so that will have to be submitted and agreed with the council.
Thank you. Councillor Busby?
Yeah, could you go to slide 16 to get a look at those 3-storey again, please? Okay, it looks to me as though there's only one entrance, which I find would be strange. It also looks to me as though all of the apartments are the same size.
The apartments are the same size, yes, and there's one entrance to the rear. It's not in the front of the building, it's to the rear.
So there's only one entrance to this building?
There's a communal entrance, one entrance, yes.
Is that
not unusual for flats.
Is that fire compliant?
We'll meet the building regs, yes.
Are there any balconies on these?
There are no balconies, just Juliet balcony effects on the images you can see running down the second one in on either side. They've got glazed panels in front of them, Juliet balconies. but not balconies per se.
I don't think they've got gardens either. I'm just wondering where people are going to dry clothes, something as simple as that.
Well, they'll have tumble dryers within the house. There's common layers out the back, but there's no designated external drying facilities.
Okay, so we've got affordable flats that are very small in size, that you think they're going to put a tumble dryer in, which is the most energy inefficient device in the home, to dry things. I just don't see that. I mean, if you drive around Pinewood where we've got flats like this...
Councillor Busby, I'm told we're straying. I do agree with you wholeheartedly that if you've got to dry clothes, most people want to dry them outside or hang them outside or do something, but we are straying, I'm told. So, Councillor Parker.
Thanks, Stuart. I've got the benefit here of looking at Google Maps, so I can see the site and see all the houses around it and things. So, do you have any notion of the density of the development, well, at Little Tufts? Do you have any data on that? What I'm thinking is in terms of this development in keeping with the other, but do you know what the density is of housing around the site?
I don't have these specific details. The one that has been constructed recently and completed, I think, is 30 development, 30 DPH. In terms of Little Tufts itself, I don't know the specific densities.
Didn't we have a figure from the parish council?
But it's
28.
Across Capel in general, it's 21. Boundary Oaks, which is very dark, very dense and cramped, is 28.
Any other questions? Well, no, it's questions to you now, I'm afraid. Well, unless you want to answer that one, yes, sorry.
It was just to expand on the density issue. I mean, the houses that were built in Capel St Mary, as there were in many towns and villages up and down the country, were built at a time when density was much lower. And nowadays, in terms of making best use of land, the densities do tend to increase. And what you've got to plan for as development, which is in the immediate context of the site, we don't believe that the density figures of 20 DPH moving up to mid-30s for the developable areas is unreasonable in this particular instance.
I think we all have our points of view on density, but I take your points. Councillor Busby.
Going back to the open space and the attenuation, I mean, it was the same with the proposal from Bentley. Why do you guys think it's a good idea to put a play area close to what is like to be a pond?
The drainage strategy says that the pond will only be a pond in an event, so it'll be dry most of the year, except when there's a storm event and it fills with water. So it will not have any water in it. It's also just a point that was raised by Parish Council. I'd like to say that it will be fenced off as well. There'll be a post and rail fence going round there to stop people getting in there at certain times, or at least warn them away from it. So it will be protected. But it is next to the open space area because most of the year that will double up as additional open space.
Thank you. Any other?
Given that we've had 3 months of rain, there's at least a quarter of the year where it'll be full of water. And my understanding is that there's been a pond of
Question, Councillor
in that
Busby.
area for many years.
Any other questions? No? Thank you very much. Oh, yeah. With no county councillor, Councillor Carpenter has sent her letter in, and her comments are in your table papers. Okay. Right. We'll now go into debate. Councillor Davis.
Actually, it's a question to yourself or Mr. Dupre. Is it within our gift, if we were to refuse this, to actually put a recommendation of the amount? Because like you, like the parish council and the residents and Councillor Carpendale, I feel it's very, very cramped. And I know they've got permission for up to 100, but is it within our gift to recommend a smaller amount?
I'm not sure. I'll get legal advice. I don't think it is, but I think we can defer that.
Yes, I mean, if they have permission for up to a certain number, whatever that number is, then that, unless the council's going to modify the outline, which is never happens in real life and would need the Secretary of State's involvement, so that's just for the sake of completeness and a remote theory. The number means they have permission for that number, and obviously you can be mindful of the size of the dwellings and say, well, some of them need to be of a smaller size to make way for the necessary sort of open space or space between dwellings or groups, but that we are bound by the number we have that has been permitted in the outline.
Thank you. I think we're going to have a little bit more debate because I think there is a feeling that members are not happy. But did you wish to make comment now or later?
Just to try and frame the debate, Chair. So if I'm understanding it right, some members are disquieted about the density of the scheme, the size of the units, etc., and also the number of bedrooms and so on. Obviously, just to remind you, there is permission for up to 100, which obviously an applicant can take to mean 100. 35 units are affordable, so we're talking about 65 market units. The 35 have responded to the needs identified. So our strategic housing team has looked at that and outlined that's been decided. So those units they are content with those. So we're really talking about 65 units, and we've gone from being concerned that some are too big and some are too small, and it's not clear, therefore, what members would expect from what's being offered. I think at appeal, the appellant may state that they're just implementing what they've got permission for, and there's not really, apart from the Housing Needs Survey in 2016, there's not a background document which would justify a refusal based on too many four-bedders, for example. We can compare with the Elmstead application, which we had last committee. There was a neighbourhood plan there that had been adopted and actually spoke on these issues. The Capel neighbourhood plan is at a very early stage, it's Regulation 14, so it carries very little weight at the moment. So you'd have to consider exactly what you're arguing about for us then to take to appeal and argue with the inspector.
Thank you. I think, members, we ought to have a little bit more debate on this and see if we can find some common grounds where we agree or disagree, and perhaps then seek legal advice at that stage. Who's next? Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just something that Sue Carpendale has brought up, and I agree with her, it should be clarified, and that is the amount of lighting to footways, whether the Suffolk County Council is going to actually going to adopt them, and what lighting are they going to adopt, if any?
Right, can you help on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in the event that the application is approved and the development goes ahead, post-construction, the roads will be offered for adoption apart from private drives. So the actual main roads you see on the layout would have street lighting. And also the footpaths and the cycleway network would have low-level lighting as well, as per Suffolk County Council requirements.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, and that will be up for adoption with Suffolk County Council. They've agreed it or not?
They were, as I understand the process, the developer offers the roads for adoption to the council. The council goes out and inspects, and if they're up to a certain standard, they meet their standard, then they adopt. If they're asked to adopt them, they will do.
Thank you, very well clarified.
Right, thank you. Any other questions? I've got a question. I'm not happy with the design of the block of 6 dwellings. I think the design there on a new housing estate in a place like Capel St Mary near the Little Tufts development, that looks to me like it's out of character. So I'm not personally happy with that. And the other point is I'd like to have seen more bungalows. I have to remind us all that we have to deal with what's in front of us, but they're points that I would have concern on. Councillor Parker, I saw your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I think it's right that in the interest of balance we do, we do explore this quite a bit further, because I mentioned about density only because I was just curious to know, what the density of the development was next door. But the point of fact is, as our officer has pointed out, that we do have outline planning permission. So a development has got to come in there, and this is what we're being asked to look at. Undoubtedly, it is of a higher density, but I actually think that the officer's paragraph 12.3 in his conclusion is absolutely pertinent, where the officer says, importantly, it is considered that the impacts of the development on the amenity of existing residents in the vicinity, 77, sorry, would not result in material detriment. So, whilst we may not, whilst we may all have differing opinions about the density of the development that's being proposed, I'm not seeing anything here that is going to give us material reason to refuse what is before us. I think it's difficult. In a perfect world, we would like to see the density of houses that were built in the 1960s and 70s, but in the 21st century, that is not going to happen with regards to viability. So I just, I'm not saying anything more than that at this stage. Just to say that, just to remind, not that members need reminding, but we are dealing with what is in front of us, and what is in front of us isn't directly related to the amenity of the development that sits to the side of it. One other point that I will make, Chair, is that I'm looking at the coloured drawing that's on the planning portal. I don't know if we've got the coloured drawing or not, but whilst we have a far more densely populated area in terms of the housing, there is also, undeniably, there is also more green space, or there appears to be, according to the drawing. So just highlight that, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ayres.
Yes, I too am concerned about the flats, the 6 flats. And I wondered if, because I live in a block of 4 flats, but we have special fire doors, and there was no mention of the fire prevention. And I too am worried about the one staircase, because in flats normally you have thicker doors, don't you?
It's a fair point, Councillor, but this is one of those situations where we've strayed into other legislation. If the buildings don't comply with building regulations, fire regulations, they're not going to get a certificate. Nobody will be allowed to live in them.
So that will be picked up. Any other, Councillor David?
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up the point on 12.3, page 77, so the point that Councillor Parker's just made. I would take issue with that. And I'm not going to sort of say the officer is wrong, but however, I think that the impact on the nearby residents has been made very clear to us in this application and in previous applications. So I'm not sure what the evidence is that there wouldn't be any impact of the amenity to the existing residents in the vicinity, because I would suggest, judging by what the parish council has said, and what the district council has said, and my own experiences visiting that area, that there would be. And the second point about the density, appreciate that it probably couldn't go back to the 1960s density, but as has already been highlighted, nearby developments, newer developments, are a lot less dense than this particular one. So I'm really uncomfortable with this.
Thank you. I think a lot of us are. Any other Councillor McLaren?
Thank you. I just want to register my concern. I don't think it meets, and I know this is immaterial, but I don't think it meets the needs of the population that is developing in Capel St Mary, and hence I would support your comment on the lack of bungalows. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Busby.
I know the officer referred to the housing needs survey for 2016 from Capel, but it is the latest one that we've got. I don't understand, I think the applicant hasn't done one, so we have to use the figures that are there. In Capel, it hasn't changed that much. We need starter homes like most places and houses to downsize to. That's important. I don't see this delivering that. We're here to determine whether we think the design, the layout, the scale, etc. is appropriate. And I don't think it is. I think generally across the board I'm disappointed. I felt there was an opportunity here for Persimmon to come forward with a scheme like they did with Hadley, which was innovative and looked attractive and delivered what people of Hadley wanted. This doesn't. This does not match the quality of that application in Hadley. There are many features in here that I don't like. We've all mentioned the three-storey block of flats. I can't see how, I mean, it's just a simple thing, but drying, washing. If you drive through Pinewood, you'll see blocks of flats like this, and washing is hanging out of windows. It looks like a slum. Even new flats look like slums when you've got lines of underwear hanging out your window. It's just not appropriate. I don't think we've got a very good layout of the village in terms of this development, in terms of the parking. It's not clear. It is on the documents that are on the website.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm concerned at the moment, and I want to ask, I've been told I could ask for deferment on this. I want to know what the legal requirements is, and if I choose to go down that road with your input, members.
I mean, Chairman, it's perfectly proper for the committee on any matter before it to say we want to defer this because we've got concerns, we want more information, we want X and Y looked into. But it's, I would suggest you define, there needs to be some definition of quite why the deferment is considered desirable. I'm also just checking, I mean, presumably, are there any time constraints over these reserved matters approvals and such? No, there aren't. No, yeah.
So we could defer this if we had some reasons, our concerns, which you could go away as officers and talk to the applicant on. Yes. Is that what you're saying to me?
Indeed, yes.
Right. Well, bearing that in mind, members, I'll go to the case officer for him just to comment, and I do note Councillor Parker. I'll come to you immediately afterwards.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a number of points that were raised by committee, and I think it's important just to respond to some of those before you deliberate further. With regard to the block, as I said in the response, in the initial comments in my presentation, it's an unusual building, fair to say, within the context of the village, but within the context of the development that you're being asked to consider, it's not unusual as an element of that. We're comfortable that that scale of building, that size of building, can sit in that development quite happily without appearing incongruous. I accept if that building was literally picked up and put somewhere else within the village, then the impact of that, you know, in some cases could be amazingly harmful. But within the overall context of the development that's being proposed, we're quite happy that that sits there well. The other thing to bear in...
Sorry to interrupt you there, but just on that point, I'll let you come back. I think it's fair to say that is an opinion. Yes. Members have expressed a different opinion. So just to put it in balance, that's all I'm saying. You're right to do what you're doing, but I think it is an opinion, members, and if we want to discuss that in a moment, we can. Carry on.
The other thing I would say with the drawings that have been produced and the darkness of the building, what they're not showing, of course, is that the actual type of brick. In this area, you have a palette of bricks, you have gaunt bricks, and you have multi-reds. So I would venture that the building itself wouldn't look that dark once it was constructed, but I understand the point. I'll just quickly go back to the issue of amenity, because I think that was raised by a councillor in a point, and I'll go back to the layout plan, the coloured layout plan, which will probably be more helpful. The issue of amenity in relation to impact on surroundings and the point of access was considered at the outline stage, and I having checked the report at the outline stage, we consulted environmental control with regard to traffic movement in and out and noise impacts on little tufts, those sorts of things. And it was found through the noise reports and noise investigation that most of the noise actually emanates from the A12 road rather than from the traffic that was going through at that point. So respectfully, I'm not sure that particular point can be revisited with regard to use of little tufts. What I would say is that in terms of amenity, one of the key things, as I said in the report, is the amenity of people along here shouldn't be harmed by the development. In the case of this area, you've got single-storey development, so obviously a lot of the overlooking and impact is designed out. There's a dwelling here which is adjacent to a dwelling there where we've considered the position of windows, and again I've said in my report that the way the windows work and the internal accommodation, they're not actually giving direct views through. Amenity on the south side, you've got long rear gardens here which are obviously distant from the edge of this development, so therefore their amenity is not adversely impacted, and obviously you've got the intervening hedging and trees. And lastly, that area of open space, as I said in the presentation, is designed in, not least, to create a nice arrival as you come through as a cyclist or pedestrian, but also keeps the development away from Boundary Oaks, which is sitting just about there. In terms of the density issue, the reason we are happy with this is that it is a higher density than the adjacent development, but in all honesty, development of that density I don't think is likely to be taking place unless there was an enormous amount of land available in order to do so. In this case, we've got an area that's defined for up to 100 houses. The developer has shown a scheme that secures 100 houses on there and also indicates open space to serve that development, which in a way makes some sort of logic to the overall use of the site, and also potentially could be a benefit to people travelling through the site, pedestrians and cyclists. And just to clarify another point while I'm thinking about it, it is a leap at the top, not a lap. So that's secured by condition. I think that's... sorry, the other thing is parking. On-plot parking is provided, and where it isn't, in accordance with our standard, and where it isn't provided on plot, it's provided in parking courts. And also, along the spine roads, there are visitor spaces. So again, I understand locally the concerns around parking, because I understand that there's parking issues, and the councillor alluded to that at a visit, but we can give you the advice that it does meet your standard, and in a way that has not given rise to concerns from the Highway Authority. So I would just advise those and put those into the mix, because I think in terms of that gives you some background as to why we were comfortable with giving you the recommendation that we were giving you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just make the point, Chair. I think the general direction of travel with regards to the conversation is one of that this is not a particularly favoured site. But I would urge caution. It's not for me to urge caution, but I think we're on thin ice here, Chair. because it's entirely within the gift of this committee to decide, as long as it's got reasonable planning reason to do so. It's entirely within the gift of this committee to say that it doesn't like this development, but what's the alternative? I think it's too easy to say, well, that's not our problem, go away and rehash it. But if 100 dwellings on this site is an issue, what are we thinking? They're going to come back with half of that, for example? So I just urge caution amongst members.
I hear what you're saying, Councillor Parker. I think the impression I'm getting and the feeling I've got is that the block, which is 6, we don't particularly like that. We would like more bungalows, and I think the design of some of it isn't right. Now, whether that could come back with a lower number or not, I don't know. But that's why I feel perhaps we could ask our officers to go away. The applicant's agent is in the room. He's hearing these comments, and the expert that he is, because we know his plan and history, he will understand where we're coming from, and perhaps, hopefully, they could all get together and talk this through, and they may come back with something a little better. I don't know. That's my feeling of it. But whether you want to go down that road or whether somebody's prepared to move a recommendation or not. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, sorry. Could I ask the officer to show on the map where these planning courts are? Maybe I'm just missing it, but I can't see them. And secondly, could I suggest that an environmental report on the end of a quiet cul-de-sac is not going to produce any noise levels? They can hear the A12 from that. But once that is opened up and the traffic is going through Little Tufts, it'd be an entirely different proposition.
Thank you. Any other comments? Oh, you've timed it, have you? Yep. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the parking courts are these areas that are coloured in to the rear of frontages. So you'll see there's 2 areas there. There's an area, there's an area over there, which is a parking court. There's further parking courts here. So there's several throughout the site, and as I say, the remainder are on plot, directly in front or to the side of dwellings. Just to go back to the Little Tufts point again, as I say, if members are concerned about that means of access to the site, my best advice to you is that that has already been rehearsed at the outline stage, unfortunately. So, we have to accept that the council has previously granted vehicular access to take place off of Little Tufts, whether we now like it or not. And that's not necessarily the constraint, but that's the fact we have to work with regard to a reserved matters application.
Thank you. Councillor Busby.
Yeah, I guess I ought to state that I do live within about 100 yards of this development, but that to me gives me an added advantage in that I know the site and I know some of the issues. It won't affect me in any way. I come out a different way. Traffic won't affect what happens to me. However, we also turned this site down because of access when it was an application for 150. So the committee has had issues with access, but that's by the way. This is about this site. I joined this committee because I wanted to deliver quality developments. I do not want to be driving round Babergh and people saying, look at that thing, who the hell approved that? And that, to me, is what would happen if we approve this layout and design and things. There's scope for it to be a lot better than this. The landowner has got more land beyond it, if need be. You can see from the layout that there are hammerheads there, which are presumably there for future developments. So he could put more land available to make it a quality site. Capel is taking a lot of extra houses. It's already at 125, 130 in the last 12 months or so. It's got 550 in the local plan. It's got another 100 here. It doesn't deserve to have poor quality developments as well. They should be quality developments. This has got some work to do, I think. Yes, it needs more bungalows. Yes, the flats should have some space for people to either sit outside, to dry clothes or whatever, not just overlook car parking spaces. There's work to be done on this. I'm not happy with this. I know it's very difficult perhaps to defend legally, but that's the way it is.
I think, first of all, we have to deal with what's within the red line. Secondly, I think the only way forward, or one of the way forwards, is for us as members to give the officers some instructions of things that we're not happy with, to go away and have a discussion with them, so that we're not closing the door down with a refusal or an approval at this stage, and see if we can get any improvement, because I personally don't like the block of flats there at all. Now, whether there is any movement on design, whether there's any movement on the amount, whether there is any movement, there was a third point which I can't remember at this moment, but it will come back to me.
Chair, if I might just...
Yeah, right, will you help us out?
Well, I don't know about help you out, Chair, but I just need to clarify with Councillor Busby that it is an interest that you're declaring on that point, and you do not feel that it is going to predetermine or influence your opinion on how you will determine this application.
No, that's right.
No, that's fine. Just needed to clarify. Thank you, Chair.
He made it very clear he went out from another direction and that. So, members, what is the steer we can give to our officers to go away and have discussions which would allow us to defer it, or, failing that, you have to make a decision one way or the other? So, Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying here. I understand that it's had outline permission. However, some of the stuff there does need to be altered, and I'm not happy with that block of flats. I think it's far too large, and again, the amount of affordability in there is all based on stacking up flats in a block of flats, basically. But you know, I totally agree that our negotiations should take place with our officers and that of the developer.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to now ask the officers. Can you go away with those reasons that I've highlighted to look at and have a discussion with them, and we can go for a deferment? Design, the bungalow question, and density, I think, was the third one. That was the third one.
Yeah, mix and type of dwelling, CS 18.
Chair, if I may, so is there a way you want to go with this? Are you saying you want more 3 beds, 2 beds, rather than 4 beds? Is that what you're saying? You don't like the design of the flats, that can be tweaked. But are you saying you want more 2 and 3 beds and fewer 4 beds? Is that what's being said here?
I don't think that is being said at this stage. We just want a better mix. If you do away with the flats, it may be that you put in some bungalows, or maybe you put in some smaller dwellings. We don't want to tie the hands to that at this stage, do we? Councillor Busby.
Well, the survey says... What programme was that? The survey says that it's starter homes and downsizing. I would have thought more 2-bedroomed houses, bungalows, were the kind of thing that we should be requiring. 42 3-bedroom and 17 4-bedroom. You know, that's what, it's 59% of the total are not complying with what people are saying they want. To me, that isn't the right kind of ratio. I would have thought we ought to be looking for at least 60%, if not 70%, should be 2-bedroomed or single-bedroom places, not 3 and 4. So I think the mix is totally wrong. And of course, if you do that, if you go to 2-bedroom from 4 to 3, you will actually provide more space. It'll look less crowded because the houses are smaller. So, you know, a design can be sympathetic to the mix and to the layout as well.
Thank you. Have you got enough to steer for us to...
Yes, Chair. I'll just remind members that really the document we have supporting this stance is the Housing Needs Survey of 4 years ago, and there's no SPD, no policy, no neighbourhood plan. So it's a thing, but you know it has some weight, but we'll go away and do as you ask.
Well, could I suggest that we wait until another one has been done?
No. I think at the moment, from the chair, I think I'd like to propose that we go for a deferment and we ask the officers to investigate with the applicant those points that we've brought out. So we're not closing it down, we're not saying they've got an approval or a refusal at this stage, and to bring it back to us at the earliest opportunity.
Sorry, Chair, just so I'm clear, could someone just summarise exactly what points you want to be addressed so I'm absolutely clear when I re-engage with the developer, please?
Well, I think the feeling has come through that we don't like the design of the flats, that it looks too cramped, whether that's too many large houses or not, and that we'd like more bungalows. Well, which is part of the mix, or the mix we'd like.
And obviously the applicant's perfectly entitled to go up to 100, but if they're smaller or there's a better mix, then it won't be so many. But he may even want to consider, and it's his option, you know, to build fewer homes there.
I don't want to add that into my deferment, but he's heard that comment. So is that acceptable? Is that enough for you to work on? That's what I need to know.
If I may paraphrase, so deferral for design of the flats, altering the mix towards lower number of bedrooms, no, I'll word it better than that, and increase the number of bungalows.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking towards, which we'll discuss with the developer.
Are you happy with that, members? Then this is for deferment.
No, I think I'm in total agreement, and I'm sure the rest of the committee are as well. It would be the best way of going forward on this application, and I'm sure our officers can do a good negotiation with our developer, and also don't forget the Swift boxes.
Thank you. Right, it's been proposed that we go for a deferment. All those in favour, please show.
1, 2.
Oh, good, it's unanimous. That's very good. Very kind, Councillor Parker.
The layout you've got, the slide layout, it's not clear on these. You can't see anything.
Can I suggest you take this up with the officer afterwards? And
Well, it's just a general point.
yeah, okay. Well, he's noted it, so hopefully he'll try and act on it. Thank you. Right, members. That will come back to us in due course, hopefully as soon as possible, but we'll have to wait and see. Right, members, we're going to move on to the last item here, which is on page 81, and it's Samantha. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a point of error on your reports. In the Strategic Planning Policy consultee response, they have quoted a policy that is no longer valid. It's policy HSO3. This application wasn't determined using that particular policy. CS11 was put in place and supersedes it. This application seeks outline planning permission for the erection of up to 19 dwellings on land east of the barn in Assington. The members carried out a site inspection on the 29th of January. 6 affordable dwellings would be required on site, with a commuted sum to make up the remainder of the 35% provision to be policy compliant. Other financial contributions would be collected via Cllr. 28 residents have objected to the scheme, and there has been 1 letter of support. The Parish Council have strongly objected to the scheme, and Highways do not consider the site to be sustainable in transport terms. The site is located to the east of the barn. The access point would be from the street, just here. The site is located outside of the built-up area boundary, which runs along the street, and is within a special landscape area, which is shown as green on that plan. The site is some distance from flood zones 2 and 3, so there's no risk of flooding. There is a listed building just here. Heritage do not believe that the scheme would impact the setting of the listed building at all. The barn, which is a farm shop, is here, and the car parking area for that shop is just there. Assington is a small, mainly linear village with a public house, church, village hall and farm shop. This aerial photograph shows the rural nature of Assington, with many fields containing orchards around the area. In 2015, a planning application for a change of use to the land to the east of the farm shop was granted. The permission allowed for 22 touring caravans or tents, 19 static caravans and 22 storage caravans. The application site that we're looking at today is outlined in red, and it would be the site of the 19 static caravans. You can see these storage caravans just along this boundary, and the mobile pitches just here. The pitches have been conditioned to not be permanent dwellings. Also in 2015, permission was granted for 3 dwellings, just here. The car parking area for the farm shop is just here. The northern dwelling is accessed from the car parking area, and these 2 further dwellings have their own access. To the north of the site, so the farm shop is just off the plan here, 8 dwellings have been granted. They have their own separate access point onto the street. In 2018, outline permission was granted for 8 dwellings to the south of the farm shop. The farm shop is just here. And this development adjoins the 3 dwellings that members saw that have already been built during their site visit. Later in 2018, a further outline permission was granted for 7 dwellings, which effectively infills between the 8 here and the further 8 dwellings in this section here, leaving just this site that we're looking at today for the touring caravans and static caravans. The new access point for the development would be through this area that has already been granted permission. Because all 4 of these applications have been put in as piecemeal development, affordable housing has not been claimed on any of these developments so far. This is the existing site plan and shows the farm shop, 3 dwellings that are already built, the 8 dwellings to the south of the farm shop, and 7 dwellings directly behind the farm shop that have not been implemented at the moment, but is my understanding that they will be coming forward for development very shortly. This is the proposed layout. This is an indicative plan only and shows how the site might be laid out, but the final layout, scale, appearance and landscaping would be subject to a reserved matters application if this outline is approved. Members are considering the suitability of the site for 19 dwellings and the access point only. The access would be an extension of the previously approved access point from the street past the 3 dwellings and through there. The existing farm shop entrance would be closed up, so this new entrance that hasn't been implemented yet would serve the farm shop and also all of this further development. The application site is outside of the existing built-up area boundary and protrudes into the countryside as shown in the local plan from 2006. This is the proposed built-up area boundary in the new joint local plan in draft at the moment. Although the draft local plan has limited weight in decision making at the moment, it does show the council's direction of travel in the future. Both of these plans are in your addendum papers, as it's quite difficult to see the coloured lines, but members should note that we do have development already granted in this section here and up here. The access point from the street with the farm shop on the left and the development of the 3 houses on the right. Moving into the site, this is the access road with one of the 3 houses on the the right-hand side there. These are the 3 dwellings that were granted permission in 2015. This is looking from the access point south down the street. This is looking north, and you can see the farm shop signage just here. This is the farm shop complex. More with the car parking area. This is the access that would be closed up once the new entrance has been installed. The access point to the site at the moment is through this archway, so through the car park and through that archway and back round. This is the site where the 15 dwellings already have permission but haven't been implemented yet. And you can see that the new the reptile fencing is in place. This is the application site, roughly taken from the middle of the site looking north. Again, looking north. This is taken from the southeastern corner and shows one of 2 concrete pads that have been installed for the static caravans. This is taken from the southwestern corner of the site. The site is well screened, however, caravans have a height of around 2.5 metres. A dwelling, even at single storey, would be double that height and would be much more visible in the open landscape. This is the other concrete pad that has been installed in the southeastern corner of the site. Looking north within the site, the blue car and caravan are roughly where the new access point would be, through the hedge. This is looking across the site from east to west with the building on the street just visible. You can just see the rooftops. This is looking into an adjoining field to the east of the site, and this is a paddock to the north of the site. No local needs survey accompanied the application. Assington is a small village with many planning permissions for new dwellings still to be implemented. In very close proximity to the application site itself, a further 23 dwellings have permission. The site is within a special landscape area and is outside of the built-up area boundary and is not included as a land allocation in the joint local plan. The development is considered to adversely impact the character and appearance of the area because of its scale, density and location. It is therefore considered to conflict with the development plan and the MPPF and is recommended for refusal. There is an error on page 96 of the recommendation for refusal. Policy CN06 should be omitted as there is no harm identified to the listed building in the street, so I apologise for that mistake. I understand that members have previously refused applications for a lack of local needs survey. This could be a further reason for refusal should members be minded to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. We have the Parish Council, Mr. Hill.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for letting me speak today on behalf of Assington Parish Council and local residents. 28 residents have formally objected to this application. Some time ago, one resident did give qualified support, but this was contingent on a complete change to the application which has not been made. Given no changes have been made, Mr. Miller is here today to to speak as an objector. The Parish Council feels that the officer's report is a fair and balanced one, and therefore I'm here to highlight key points and give further context. The Parish Council has supported around 50% of recent planning applications, and we're supportive of sustainable development in the parish. However, the Council strongly objects to this application primarily on 3 grounds. Number 1, there is substantial harm to the landscape and village character. This is caused by the location of the application being in open countryside, visible from a number of public footpaths, as well as the playing field and private gardens. It's in a special landscape area, and the open countryside forms a key part of the character of the parish. The application site stretches well beyond the Vickery Estate towards Assington Brook, and well beyond the small closes which have been given recent planning permission. It is therefore very different to nearby applications which have been granted permission, and it would severely damage the landscape character. The applicant relies on the fact that there are static caravans on the site currently. These are no more than 2.5 metres in height and therefore can be screened with low hedging. Houses clearly of 7 metres in height cannot be so screened. Substantial harm would result. Our second point is about the unsustainable nature of the location. Assington has limited facilities and minimal local employment. The local school is 4 miles away, but is oversubscribed. The bus service is being cut by Chambers currently. As the officer's report acknowledges, residents in the new houses would be totally dependent on the motor car. The existing static caravans are only used seasonally. As you can see in the photos actually, there are no cars on the site at all. Permanent housing clearly will be used all year round. So we expect the new housing will result in an increase of 15% to the traffic going through the street. This is on top of 25% increase from other building. The street is single file in places. It does not have pavement on the vast majority of it, and residents have to walk on the road to access the pub and the church. It's extremely dangerous. We have speeding traffic like many villages do, and particularly to pushchair and wheelchair users. Suffolk Highways agree and say clearly it's not a sustainable location. Our third point is that there's no demonstrable need for housing in the village. Babergh's local draft plan sets a minimum housing requirement of 38 dwellings. We have a neighbourhood plan which has reached its pre-submission consultation stage, and this sets out sites for 67 dwellings. The village has therefore been successful in identifying sustainable locations for development, and I therefore implore the committee to reject this unsustainable application.
Thank you very much. Spot on. Members, any questions? Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. With regards to your neighbourhood plan, you say it's at the pre-submission consultation stage.
That's
so
right.
Whilst it has limited weight for the purposes of this committee, nonetheless, is there an allocation? Have you allocated sites within your neighbourhood plan?
We have. Sorry, may I press the button? We've allocated sites both which have existing planning permission and also a site which doesn't have planning permission. So we have 67 dwellings coming to Assington. Babergh have set us at a minimum of 38.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on that particular comment, whereabouts against where this is are the other proposed sites Benard? Can you tell me, are they within that area of those 67 houses you just quoted?
Certainly not all of them, no. I can't really show you into detail, but they are spread throughout the village, basically. Some are in this area, some are towards the north end, some towards the south end.
Thank you. Any other questions, points? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have an objector, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. The disadvantages of the proposed development outweigh any potential benefits. I ask for permission to be refused. I fully support the reasons given by the Parish Council. My written representation listed items of public amenity and biodiversity drawn from the NPPF which could potentially benefit Assington. The application is not offering them, however. In fact, the applicant has taken an important facility away from the village by closing the footpath along the edge of his land. I quote the consultation comment of Public Realm: "There is no public space, open space provision, and Public Realm would like to see open space incorporated into the development." This was written in September 2019, yet it's brought no revised proposal from the applicant. The applicant has over a hectare of green space at the site. Such provisions does seem necessary under the Joint Open Space Strategy, OS4, where new housing development is proposed. Consideration should be given to improving existing open spaces within the parish where the development is located. Also, the NPPF, for instance, paragraph 174, promote ecological networks. I can see no merit in the application. I have in the past discussed the amenity space issue with the applicant. He said he was sympathetic in principle. My suggestion to Mr. Thane would be, if he wishes to make a fresh proposal, he could arrange to discuss it with the Parish Council. Thank you.
Questions? I've got one for you. You commented that closing of a footpath. I'm under the impression the only people who can close a footpath is the County Council. Can you just confirm what you said there? Clarify for me, please.
It was a permissive footpath that had been used for a long time, and it linked two parts of the village.
Thank you. Right. Any other questions, members? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Now have the applicant's agent, Mr. Ben Alvin. You sir know the procedure, so I won't repeat it.
Thanks, Chairman. And good afternoon, members. Thank you for the opportunity to address you on this matter. As you've heard, the Council have previously granted planning permission for the use of this parcel of land as part of a development for 22 touring caravans, 19 static caravans and 22 stored caravans at any time. That permission has been implemented and is being operated, albeit not currently to its full potential, and you've seen that from your site visit. However, it is wholly capable of being relied upon and does therefore constitute a viable fallback position, which forms an important material consideration when determining the proposal. With that in mind, the applicant wishes to address the comments made as to both the highways position and the landscape impacts of the proposal. Firstly, the site is not an undeveloped parcel of land, which is a point accepted by the planning officer in the committee report. The Council have accepted a situation where 22 touring caravans, 19 statics and 22 stored caravans and all of the associated traffic that would bring was found to be acceptable, and has subsequently approved an additional 15 new dwellings in lieu of part of that proposal, also finding those to be acceptable. This application seeks permission to replace the elements of the static caravans with 19 permanent dwellings, where there can only be a mirror in the likely traffic using the site. It would be no different. This cannot be considered to be harmful or unsustainable, and existing permission does not appear to have been considered at all in the Highway Authority's response. Secondly, much is made in the report and from the presentation as to the harm that would result to the landscape from the proposed development, yet the argument made is simply that dwellings would likely be taller than the approved caravans, so must therefore be harmful. There is no assessment made of where this harm would occur, what views would be affected, or where the dwellings would be able to be seen from. There are no public footpaths that traverse this site, nor is the site visible at all from Barracks Road or directly from the street, other than in obscured views through trees, and which will subsequently be obliterated by the otherwise approved developments. There are significant hedgerows and trees to each and every boundary of the site, and it is entirely possible to design this proposal so as not to be harmful in landscape terms. Indeed, it would extend only the same distance to the east as the Vickery estate, which lies further north. New developments have been approved to the west and north of this site, so it is unclear why this proposal is considered to be harmful to the landscape when it will simply be seen in wider views that take in the context of those new developments. It should be recognised this is an outline application where specific details of the proposal are entirely within the gift of the local authority to control. Opportunities to require additional landscaping, amend the layout, revise the housing mix and to control the scale of the buildings and their appearance all remain within the control of the local planning authority. The applicant will work with the council to develop the specific details of the scheme to meet their design, landscape and highway aspirations for the site at that stage. Members, the applicant considers this proposal would make a valuable contribution to the council's housing supply in lieu of previously permitted units on the site, and there is little doubt the proposal can meet the council's design and landscape requirements. It is well located relative to the village, being
Mr. Elvin. Questions? I've just got one which I need just to follow through. The public footpath, you stated no public footpath was closed. Bearing in mind that you heard I asked the same question to the previous speaker. Can you answer that?
It was news to me, Chairman. I looked at my client at the point when it was mentioned and he also said no. And the comment seemed to be it was a permissive path, not a public footpath.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Ben. You mentioned just at the end there that you think this will make a contribution to the housing need, but just picking up on what our officer said at the end of her comments in her presentation, I'm guessing from that there was no local needs assessment undertaken for this application.
No, simple answer is no. And it is really difficult, having heard the items before today as well, in terms of where you sort of submit to providing a full local needs assessment in terms of a scale of development, and also where there's a neighbourhood plan being developed, because the parish council comments on this show already that there is a significant amount of development that's been potentially permitted. That includes some development on the adjacent parts of this site, but that it almost already meets the needs that they've identified and actually more, but yet they're still allocating sites. So it's, you know, is there a need, isn't there a need? But no, we haven't provided a specific survey.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Osborne.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a bit concerned about on page 84, 10, infrastructure. Physical infrastructure in relation to public drainage and water systems. No main sewerage. Does that include this site?
Chair, the problem I've got is I've got a web version of this which doesn't have page numbers on, so I haven't got a. I've got the.
Sorry, the officer behind you is going to hand you a copy of it. Page 84, paragraph 10.
Again, Chairman, I mean, this comes back to the whole point of allocating development in the village for a neighbourhood plan. If there is no infrastructure in the village, why are they allocating sites? There are ways and means of delivering the drainage on this site that don't necessarily mean you need to have mains drainage to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Busby.
Happy New Year, Ben. Regardless of whether we should be building on this site or not, the previous houses that have been approved and are being built on this, near this land, look to be fairly large housing. Looking at the split of houses on here, there's not one two-bedroomed house. They're all bigger than that. Very few, there's a couple of bungalows, 2 or 3 bungalows. Given the fact that this is a sensitive site and you wanted to minimise the impact on the landscaping, wouldn't it have been better to go for smaller, lower housing?
You know what I'm going to say, don't you? This is an indication. This is an outline application with no detail, and I think the strategic housing officer has asked for more smaller units, which is entirely achievable. There are 4 bungalows in that spec that we suggested, and there are 2/3 bed terrace properties which could easily be made 2. I think from the point of view of revising the mix, that's what I said in my presentation. It's entirely up for grabs. It's in the LPA's gift to ask for what they want and have delivered on the site, and this is a suggestion.
Thank you. Does that help?
Well, yes, but wouldn't it be nice if you came forward with something that people wanted rather than the thing that provided the greatest profit?
Yes, we can. Yeah, we would do that.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a very short question, really, Ben. I notice on the agenda the application is subject to pre-application advice, and you didn't go forward with that. Would that have been helpful?
So I wasn't subject to. No, I mean, yes, quite potentially. I mean, if we were, I think from our point of view, when I'd first discussed this with the client, the position was we have a position on here of 19 units being permitted. All right, they were seasonable occupation, but that in essence we were prepared to trade that permission for something else. If we were going to get into the elements of detail, which we will do if we can get an outline permission, then we will sit down with officers and discuss that mix, that design, that layout, and all the details. We're just here to establish principles to start with.
Thank you. Councillor Busby.
Should this be approved, would the applicant be prepared to add the previous houses to the 19 and then take 35% of that for affordable?
They're not his. He was the applicant on one of those proposals. Both sites have been bought by a developer who is bringing them forward or bringing them together. But unfortunately, when we looked back at the position, and I think there's a situation in Newton very similar to this at the moment, which Councillor Parker may know about, the sort of accumulation of sites and bits of sites being built on is something that Babergh has now seemingly switched on to and is trying to sort of collate, stop people, but they weren't the same applicant, they weren't the same developer when they were first proposed. I think we are providing 6 on site here with the extra 0.65 provided by commuted sum. I think one of the points Mr Miller makes in his submission on the application is that most of the developments in Assington have delivered absolutely no affordable housing, and that's part of the problem, but I can't offer that because he doesn't own it.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Ben, if members were minded to go against officer's recommendation for this, it would see approval for 37 dwellings at that particular point. But no transport statement has been provided. Is that correct?
Yeah, again, it's one of these things where the highways comments came forward late. They weren't asked for on either of the previous 2 applications, despite the fact that there were 19 units on this piece of land and we've added 15 dwellings. It wasn't requested, and it's again, there's no there's no threshold. They've now asked for it in February, I believe it was, January, potentially. It wasn't something we were asked to provide, and we potentially could have done.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? No? Thank you very much. We don't have the County Councillor present. Councillor Parker is a member of the Planning Committee and has chosen to stay a member, so he's the local ward member. We're now going to general debate, and we'll start with you, Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, to a certain extent, I'm going to listen to the debate unfold. I would just say that there is compelling justification given in the officer's report to support the officer's recommendation to refuse, in my opinion, on this. I mean, I'm quite happy to listen to the debate. I always keep an open mind on these things, but you know, just from the interaction that we've just had with Ben there, some of the highlights that I'd point out. Obviously, we've had no local needs assessment on the application for this. There's no transport statement has been provided. It's already been established that the application site is outside of the current built-up area boundary. It's outside of the proposed settlement boundary in the forthcoming joint local plan. And of course, with this application, the district doesn't have a housing shortfall at the moment. So full policy weight, it seems to me, applies. What I would just say is that Assington is a linear village, and I'm sure the officer will put the maps back on the screen. It's a linear village, and it has accepted a tremendous amount of new development in the past 18 months. The Parish Council made note of it. It's shown in the report. 54 properties granted in the last 18 months, and yet somehow Assington has managed to retain its rural feel. What this application proposes to do, as I just mentioned with Ben there, is if members were minded to support this application, it would plonk, and I use that word unreservedly, it would plonk 37 dwellings in a non-linear form, part of which will be outside of the built-up area boundary. So, and I will just mention as well one point that was raised a little while ago with regards to sustainability. Since this application has gone forward, Chambers Buses they're in a consultation. In fact, their consultation period has finished. Their proposals from Chambers Buses is to withdraw the daily bus service on all but school times. So in actual fact, the village has become less sustainable, not more sustainable. So I'll leave it there, Chair, for the time being.
I think it's only right to thank Councillor Parker. You referred to 37 dwellings. We are talking of 19 on this particular planning application. I know you've added them all up, I understand that, but to make it clear, we are talking of 19. And the other point, you said 54 had been approved. Do you know how many of those have been actually built?
I'll be honest with you, Chair. I don't know the precise figure of those that have been built. I mean, there was the two that are material to this were approved only last week, in fact, for full planning. But a lot of them have been built. I think if we've all driven through the village, we've seen the new builds that have taken place up and down the street there in Assington.
Thank you. I think what I was really getting at is that if people build the developments that they got the permissions for, it would help us a lot. But they get permissions and sit on them in some cases, but I'm not suggesting that's happened here at all. Any other comments? Councillor McCarran.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to address the question to Sam, if I may. Having listened to the plans foreseen by the Parish Council itself, and
sorry, they can't hear you again.
Oh, sorry. Having heard the parish councillor and heard about the development, when you look at the highways comment that this proposal, the current proposal, is not considered a sustainable location from a transport policy perspective, in fact, the facts that are stated about transport and access have actually applied, that those have not changed. So they've applied to every planning application that's been put before you. So that seems a bit inconsistent.
Yeah, 19 dwellings doesn't actually trigger a transport assessment because it's such a small number of houses. However, their response is taking into account all of the other houses as well, and they felt that perhaps it would have been helpful to have a transport assessment because of the other dwellings that have actually been given permission. However, we are where we are. We don't have it. It's not required by policy, and therefore we don't have one.
Any other questions? Councillor Busby.
Yeah, we should have this plan. Wouldn't it be nice if we did have a plan? Perhaps we are going to have a plan, which says these are the houses that we're going to build, this is where we're going to build them, and this is the kind of houses that we want, the size of houses. Because, quite frankly, enough's enough in Assington. They've done their bit. Why should we keep approving extra housing on top of what's outlined in potentially our local plan? I think we should be much firmer in what we allow and the kind of things, the kind of houses that are coming forward. We should be stating that unless they're 2-bedroomed or bungalows or there's a mix like this, it's got no chance of approval. Not just keep getting applications forward, which are for 19 houses, large houses, which go with the other 18 large houses, which don't really meet the need and are excessive to Assington's needs. So, to me, the statement that they've done their bit, they've done more than they've required to do, is enough to say, I'm sorry, I approve the officer's recommendation. In fact, I'll propose the officer's recommendation.
So you've proposed the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder for that? Wait a minute. I've got a seconder, Councillor Osborne.
Sorry, Chair, it's just to clarify, as discussed earlier, just to go through you as the Chair, that would be the omission of the reference to policy CN06.
Yes.
And the addition of lack of need surveys per CS11.
This is what the officer outlined right at the beginning. You're both happy with that, Councillor Busby and Councillor Osborne? Thank you. I think the only comment I would have, Councillor Busby, is that hopefully the more people sit in on these or look at it, they can see that we are becoming a bit more wanting to see better quality, a better mix, more behaviour, more development when they've got the permissions to get on and do them. So I think the message is getting out there, hopefully. Anyway, any other comments? No? Right. It's been proposed and seconded that we accept the officer's recommendation for refusal and noting those two policy number changes. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? That's unanimous. Okay. Thank you. I think we've got to the end of it, members. There's no site inspection next week. So I'll see you in a fortnight. Thank you.